Come on, streamer, go live. Go live, streamer.
Okay, we should be live. Let me wait until the viewer count and stuff updates. If people in the chat can hear us, if you can see us, please let us know. I'm with the boys today, and we're going to have a wonderful time on stream. So please, if you are here, somebody just let me know if everything's working. There we go.
Can we get ones in the chat?
Okay, yeah, a couple ones, and then we will just, we won't waste any time. We'll just launch into things today. We got a 5x5, so I'm guessing it's good. Audio loud and clear. Okay. Well, thanks everybody for joining us today. It is Gerb. I'm joined by NewsNation's Rob Jones. A little bit before we get started, I want to celebrate my good friends and the boys here today. Rob Jones is NewsNation's newest finest. Rob is working directly under Ross Coulthart as a content and research producer for Reality Check. In my opinion, Rob is more of a correspondent as he is already fostering relationships with folks on the Hill. So we're going to see wonderful things coming from Rob. I got his NewsNation business card on the shelf here. I'm not going to show it to dox him. And Kerm here is launching his own Substack to share his own articles, his own thoughts. It's going to be wonderful. These guys are doing some tremendous things. I'm just honored to be their friends and to be here. And this gives us more of an excuse to do more lives. So whenever these gentlemen publish something, Rob, you've already been featured on NewsNation for 2 leading articles. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. I've got 2 separate bylines that were leading headlines on the website within my first 3 weeks. So it's been a pretty exciting time. Just happy to be here. You know, I appreciate you shouting me and Kerm out, man. Rising tide raises all ships.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, that's just why I'm happy you guys are making more of an imprint in this subject. The young guns are here. You guys are truly brilliant. You got so much to share. Once you guys start to understand Kerm's knowledge about kind of the finance world, you guys are going to lose your minds. I know I promised to you guys maybe one day, Kerm and I will sit down with Catherine Austin Fitz and do an interview on financing of the black world. Maybe we will see that someday soon, and Kerm will be spearheading how we chat about that. But for today, we have so much to talk about. It's been a bit since our last live, of course. We have the UFO file drops or lack thereof to talk about. Us three were all just in Washington, D.C., so we have Stephen Greer's May 8th National Press Club event to talk about. We all attended that in person. We have some questions and answers to go through at the end. Rob has some excellent new work discussing a possible new gatekeeper for the UFO legacy programs. And Kerm has some very poignant discussion about some of the new file drops. So kind of before we get into anything, Artie Laxative Pain, I've seen you around so much, my friend. Thank you so much. And yeah, guys, Rob is doing great things. So thank you. So before we jump in, guys, let's just do a temperature check. How was the trip to Washington? I know it seems like every time us three are together, something major happens. We've been together for Soul events. We've been together for the September 9 hearings. And the Stephen Greer event was released announced a couple months ago. So we had plans for that. And then it just turned out some big news hit. So just how are you guys feeling before we get started?
Kerm, you want to go first?
Thank you. I appreciate it. I will say waking up Friday morning in Washington, D.C. with war.gov/UFO hot on the presser, that was crazy. I know there were kind of signals about it earlier last week about whether or not these documents are going to drop. Tim Burchett going on the Joe Rogan said he was going to have a call with the Pentagon, and then kind of statements teasing that the first tranche was going to be released on Friday. Coincidence that it lines up with the disclosure press conference and all that stuff? Yes, it is. It was a coincidence. I mean, even Greer mentioned it as well at that conference, which we did attend as well. It is, to your point, it is very funny how these things happen. I think the first release of stuff, I think we'll probably get into it. The videos were interesting. I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of these end up coming out that we aren't looking at advanced technology or things that would probably make us all interested. But I think it's a good first start. And I know we've kind of been talking with folks about that kind of in the immediate aftermath of this release. There's more to come. And even some of the Congress folks, specifically Burchett, has talked about how future files release might be an holy crap moment for the country. So I know we like to say in this community, disclosure is always 2 weeks away. It's kind of been a meme, and now we're several years in. For some of us, it's been decades. I don't necessarily wait with bated breath. I try to manage or have really no expectations for this stuff. But I will say it is really endearing to see the level of interest by the public, just with the number of downloads on the website, over 500 million hits within a 24-hour period. That's crazy. I think our the guys in the Pentagon are probably looking at this like, yeah, we can't make this go away. So cautious optimism is kind of my term to describe how I am kind of feeling about all this stuff. But what do you think, Rob?
I mean, listen, Kermit, I just want to build on what you said. You and I and Gerb talked when you arrived on Friday morning. We know that this is sort of a test the water moment. Like, stick your toe in, find out whether or not it's warm or not. Can I dip myself all the way in? Am I strong enough to put my waist into the water, if you know what I mean, men? And thankfully, the public has given us that sort of reaction. It's fantastic. Credit to everybody out there. There were millions and millions and millions of downloads, and this has gone possibly the best way that we could have possibly imagined. The sheer network load that they experienced with those file drops is probably a really positive note, because the people in the Trump administration who are looking at this, from my understanding, were really, really concerned with the analytics. They wanted to use those analytics in order to determine whether or not there was enough public interest for them to continue to move forward and for them to continue to press against the boundaries that they found in their process of trying to bring these files out. Obviously what we got was relatively tame. A lot of it was probably not non-prosaic. That's a dumb way of saying a lot of it was probably fairly prosaic. But like we've said, this is definitely a big step in the right direction. So
maybe it would be a good time to discuss that actually on, was it No, it was Friday. Rob, we were both on NewsNation talking to Ross Coulthart about kind of the current state of affairs. Maybe we can expand on that a bit. Mainly because, of course, our time was cut short because Mr. Elizondo was the first guest and he couldn't really shut up. So to kind of build and explore more, I mean, none of us were extremely impressed with the file drop. Like we said, it's an issue to test the water. However, I do think we're at an important crossroads and at quite a bit of risk to not necessarily put the cat back or the genie back in the bottle, but to have a sort of deflated disclosure attempt, or sort of what ATIP wanted back in 2017, which was revelations of not an amorphous non-human presence on the planet, but nothing about crash retrievals and technical vehicles. So as we heard Dave Grushey on Brett Baer, he's aware of elements of both the CIA and DIA, Defense Intelligence Agency, that are trying to actively block the administration from procuring some of the files they might need to start a disclosure of crash recoveries and exploitation efforts. And that is what worries me quite a bit. I said this to Ross, and I'll echo it again early, just because I think this is so important. For decades, the legacy program apparatus has maintained control and secrecy through the DoD, through the White House to an extent, through the intelligence community, and through the Department of Energy. So I personally would really like to see a different federal executive agent or kind of national lead on procurement and release of some files, specifically maybe the Department of Homeland Security, DHS. I'm sure, as everybody here is aware, the DHS was kind of the container for the Prospective Special Access Program, Kona Blue, back in 2010, when Lockheed Martin was trying to give UFO materials to the OSAP program. So I have my concerns. I bet you guys do too, and maybe we could talk about them, talk about little victories, and so forth.
Yeah, absolutely. Kermit, you want to go first?
I mean, I don't really have too many comments to go on kind of those aspects. I'm 100% with you. I would say, like, with Department of Homeland Security, it is interesting that they were kind of involved with the Kona Blue Prospective Special Access Program, but I guess I would be more interested in Homeland Security for the basis of like the amount of sensors and the platforms that they have, and some of the areas like looking at the border and whatnot, like that is a huge treasure trove of just data, like raw data that you can get potentially to identify anomalies, things like that. Also, obviously, I think there's some areas in Southwest United States, kind of Mexico area, that's like a known hotspot. So, hey, maybe it would be good that we get some of Department of Homeland Security's buy-in and potentially them sharing data. But that was not part of the files release. That was at least not part of this tranche 1. However, we have seen Border Patrol actually release videos previously, a couple years back. I think it was the Customs and Border Patrol CBP that put out some of these UFO videos. So, hey, maybe we'll see it. And I think they would be a good group to work with.
I mean, I agree. I agree with you that yes, DHS would likely be a good group to work with in terms of like the amount of raw data that's available and things of that nature. But one thing I would point out that was pointed out to me over the course of this last weekend is that DHS is an upstart department. DHS was created after 9/11. They are not part of the original departments that existed during the Cold War. And part of my understanding is that part of why the Kona Blue Perspective Special Access Program was denied was that there was a general desire not to allow new individuals to join into the UAP circus, if you know what I mean. Those new departments are, you know, they don't want to allow new blood into this if they can keep their circle more closed. So I think there's a bit of a resistance there, more than likely to involve DHS, and that will probably continue for the future.
Absolutely. Yeah. With the Kona Blue PSAP, I mean, it was DHS S&T, Science and Technology, that essentially was trying to serve maybe a mere but yet fledgling role similar to the CIA DS&T. There would be major resistance there. That is why this would require an executive lead to establish DHS as a national lead. But, you know, as long as the DOD, well, now DOW, IC, and Department of Energy are finding their own files, which we all know a lot of DOE stuff is protected by the 1954 Atomic Energy Act and statutory authority. It's the whole situation of we've investigated ourselves and found we did nothing wrong. More so than the file drop, what impressed me the most, as I'm sure you guys saw, is Representative Eric Burleson, who is a champion of this subject, this guy has really put a lot on the line and does a lot for this subject. He tweeted out and he said, hey, MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, Lincoln Laboratory, an FFRDC, of course, federally funded research and development center, established in 1951 after the closure of MIT Radiation Lab in World War II, which was Vannevar Bush's child. They said, hey, we know you have a video from 1952. It's called Flying Saucer Talk, led by Edward J. Ruppelt, who Ruppelt was the leader of Sign, Grudge, or one of the two or both, predating the Blue Book era. Burleson said, we know where this file is. We know its marking number. We know its designation. So give it to us. That's the sort of leadership that I enjoy seeing. And that's probably David Grush rubbing off on Burleson a little bit, but that's the sort of stalwart leadership we need right now. Especially 1952, that's pre-Robertson panel. I would imagine Ruppelt's chat is a bit more open, including possibly some further video of intriguing things within that data set.
Pardon me.
Well, you know, now's a good time, Rob. We have people starting to filter in. So, yes, I will give you the floor. You give our full preamble, but Rob here has some sensational research he would like to present to everybody. Ladies and gentlemen, this is NewsNation's Robert Jones.
All right. Give me just a moment to pull up the slideshow here, everybody.
Oh, we got a slideshow?
I have a complete slide deck. Give me just a moment to pull that up.
Yeah,
while you're
pulling it up, somebody in the chat said, why are we all wearing suits today? It's a new era for the lives. Rob is working for NewsNation. Kerm is translating some of his beautiful ideas and work into his Substack. So it is a new effort to really kind of increase the seriousness with which we take these lives. So it's a new era. Rob, do you need me to add the presentation to stage, or can you?
Yeah, if you would add that to stage, I went ahead and began the screen share process. All right, guys. So I want to say thank you to two people in particular. There's an individual called Novelist on Twitter, as well as another individual. I don't want to butcher your name. I know your name is Lincoln. So Lincoln, thank you very much. He's one of the researchers for American Alchemy. I'll do my best to, in the comments to the video, supply both of the usernames for these individuals who helped sort of prod me in the right direction with this. It's a funny story. I ended up waking up out of a weird dream I had last night, and just in a way to, sort of try and pass the time, I checked Twitter, and I'm one of those guys that keeps my Twitter feed is always set to most recent. So if you haven't tweeted in the last 5 to 10 minutes, I'm probably not going to see it. But I just so happened to see a series of interactions between these two individuals that piqued my interest. And so that led me to this. I just wanted to sort of put that out there, say thank you to those guys, and lead into what I found last night. This unfortunately caused me to stay up all night. So if I look a little bit tired, I apologize in advance. It's been a little bit of an evening, but I could not go to sleep once I realized what I had found. So we ask ourselves very often, what is the source of all of the interference that we feel that we find with like congressional interaction with the UAP topic? This is complex. This is going to take at least like 20 slides for me to truly explain to you guys what it is that I found here. Sorry, I'm a little excited because of how significant this is. But I do believe that I have identified the apex gatekeeper who is in charge of just about every single bit of information filtration to Congress on the UAP subject for the past roughly 10 years. So here we go.
And Rob, before you get started, can I explain one thing about why, what you're about to present is so important?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, of course, because it's been long understood that legacy programs, retrieval, storage, and exploitation of non-human technical vehicles are housed within both special access programs, controlled access programs, and covert access programs. Even the most secretive of which, waived, unacknowledged special access programs, are still supposed to have a reporting structure that can't be waived towards even the apex of kind of congressional reporting, which is the Gang of Eight. And we know from Dave Grush, we know from the late Harry Reid, there is a program set that has completely bypassed even briefing in the Gang of Eight. So what you're saying here is this would be the sort of individual who even bypasses congressionally mandated reporting requirements for even waived, unacknowledged special access programs.
Right, exactly. And I would even further posit that this individual's role, both overtly and covertly, is to specifically bypass those reporting requirements. His role is not only to interpret those requirements as laid out in statutory, statements, whether that, throughout the specific language of the laws that are placed, but then also to coordinate the Department of Defense's response to that. So let me move forward here, and we'll get to naming names. So the thesis here is that there is one career civil servant who has functioned as the apex working level gatekeeper between the UAP subject and Congress inside the Department of Defense in the same position across 3 administrations, which would be the first Trump administration, the Biden administration, and the second Trump administration since at least December 2017. This guy's name is all over the paper trail. I'm very surprised that Greenwald or other individuals didn't eventually pick up on this. I'm glad I was clued into it, and here we go. Okay, here he is. His name is David A. Kozik. He is a career senior executive service civil servant in the Department of Defense. His history prior to December 2017 and certain FOIA requests that resulted in the revelation of his job and role, his history prior to that is absolutely nothing. We can't find a thing. I tried for about 9 hours over the course of the last day. I've been able to locate absolutely zero biography prior to 2017. This guy has carried 2 hats, which is very important, and I will expand on that in just a moment. His 2 roles are Director of Congressional Activities under the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security, and the Chief of the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Legislative Affairs Intel Team. Okay, we'll get into that further, but both of those roles together combine to create a portfolio that spans all of the intelligence services and all of the UAP subject with regards to Congress's access to it.
Rob, can I stop you real fast before you continue?
Go ahead.
You mentioned Kozik working under the USD-INS, Under Secretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security. Recent David Recently, David Grush called out the current USDINS by name for more effort on the UFO transparency issue. In addition, USDINS is in charge of one of the three types of overseeing one of the three types of SAPs, intelligence SAPs, critical to national security. And as well, of course, we have former USDI at the time, James Clapper, who, of course, was a bit of a mob boss on this subject. So just for a quick, tiny couple sentences on the importance of USDI, please continue. And I'm sorry for interrupting.
No. You're perfectly fine. You're offering very, very necessary context here. So when we talk about dual hats, this is a term used within the military and in government to encapsulate someone who carries two separate roles, has to operate between both of those ostensibly full-time roles on a regular basis. So this individual, David Kozik, carries those two roles. Office of the Undersecretary of Office of the Undersecretary of Defense, which is where Arrow reports. This is the individual to which Arrow directly reports. He is also the Intel SAP Central Office, or in charge of the Intel SAP Central Office, and he sets DoD intelligence and security policy. Now, the ASDLA Intel team is the OSD level office that coordinates every DoD Congress engagement on intelligence matters. Now, when I say coordinates every single DoD Congress engagement on intelligence matters, I am not, how do I say this? I'm not exaggerating. They coordinate them all. They actually manage a database, and I'll get into that later. So this position at the intersection here is very unique. Not very many people carry both of these roles that allow them to do the things that we're going to talk about. Now, there's 4 different mechanisms that this individual is going to utilize that I'm going to show you are part of his gatekeeper role. But first, let's talk about how long he's been in this position. Most senior executive service positions are between a 3 to 5 year appointment, and then you rotate to a different position. This is fairly standard across the SES. However, this individual has been in both of these roles, one of which he's been in from at least December of 2017, the other of which we know he's been in at least since August of 2020. So,
and Rob, tell us what a senior executive official is.
Well, the senior executive service is the, if you're familiar with government service positions, you would be rated on a scale of GS 1 through, what is it, 16, 15? I can't recall the top.
I think 15.
I thought max was 15.
Yeah, so GS 1 through 15, those are the ranks that you have. And then beyond that, you essentially become an officer within the civil service. You have to go through a special series of courses, indoctrinations. You have to be, approved by the federal government. And then you become what's called the SES. It's very, very, very important set of individuals that achieve this role. I want to say it's between like 200 to 300 individuals total within the entire federal government that are within the SES at any given time. This is not a large cadre of individuals, and usually they serve very, very important roles. So moving on from that.
With just a quick sentence, a one sentence equivalent to an SES is a civilian equivalent to a general or flag officer.
Yes.
So an SES 1 would be equivalent to a 1-star general or 1-star admiral, SES 2, 2-star, and so forth. Just wanted to interject that.
This is why it was considered so significant that Jay Stratton was a senior executive service official that was tasked with investigating UAP.
He was DISIS, right? Defense Intelligence Senior Executive Service?
I
believe he was
DISIS.
Sure. Okay.
That sounds right.
Yeah. So that being said, we know what the significance is of having an SES individual and also having a dual-hatted SES individual who carries multiple roles that report to multiple different authorities within the same department. This is somewhat unique. I have looked through many, many other instances of these roles, and I have never found another such instance. So moving on. The org chart anomaly. When you look at the Office of the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Legislative Affairs, you can see here that we have a very interesting bit here. Inside the red square, we see that Mr. David Kozik, SES, is the only individual titled Director instead of Team Chief, which indicates that he does actually have and executes authority over the other individuals that are at his similar level within this org chart. That is very important. So there are 4 levels of gatekeeping that this individual would have the ability to exhibit or exert. 1 is structural, 2 is definitional, 3 is procedural, and 4 is coordinational. We're going to go into each and every one of those in excruciating detail here in just a moment, but just sort of track those and we'll continue. So lever 1, the structural choke point. Talk about DoD Intel legislative liaisons. These are all coordinated through a single office across DIA, NSA, NGA, NRO, DCSA, Joint Staff of J2, ARO, the Surface Intelligence Components, and the combatant commands. They all go to one office. That's the Office of the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Legislative Affairs. Anything that has to report to Congress for any reason whatsoever flows through this individual's desk. And like I mentioned in the previous slide, those only 4 peers that he has, which are going to be the chiefs for policy, acquisition, research and engineering, and personnel and readiness, are all at a lower level than he is. He is listed as a director. They are listed as chiefs. There is a big difference between the two, and that is important delineation. So, lever number 2. Definitional control. This is one of the key levers with which you can control Congress's oversight over your subject in any way, shape, or form. Section 1687 of the fiscal year 2024 NDAA created the post-Grush, post-Schumer rounds congressional notification regime for UAP records. Those 2 central terms located here are UAP and involving, okay? When we go down to the actual nuts and bolts of these statements, those are the 2 statements that remain undefined within that piece of legislation. It is important that those are undefined within the legislation because that allows for a very liberal determination of what they mean. So whoever operationalizes those 2 words controls the perimeter of how that statutory authority operates. So we're going to look at a piece of evidence here. This is from March 6, 2024. This is a email from Susan Goff to David Kozik and says, Dave, flagging you for in case you haven't heard. We do not want to see SUAS, which is a term for small unmanned aerial systems, added to AARO's portfolio. This was sent the same day that Senator Gillibrand pressed AARO on the absence of a central UAS database in a closed briefing. The definitional move expressed in plain language in writing from Public Affairs to Kozik. So we've got, let me just go back there. We've got a public affairs officer speaking to an SES, public servant, stating a scope change that they want to focus on, okay? So they are very clearly within this email speaking to each other and indicating that they are controlling the definition of UAP so as to control how they need to conform to congressional mandate, okay? That's extremely important, and this is sort of a smoking gun here. We're going to go to the next slide here. Lever number 3, the tracking ledger. This is a very important thing. I only found this due to LinkedIn. Shout out to people who share too much information on their LinkedIn. You guys are the lifeblood of my profession.
Happens a lot. Okay?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. All right. So there is an operational database that is operated inside of the office managed by David Kozik that assigns, evaluates, and coordinates all of the DoD responses to Congress on a national defense and intelligence legislation level. Anything that enters that database is on the record. Now, if for some reason they decide that something is not part of their portfolio, that UAP portfolio, then it doesn't enter that database and it doesn't get tracked. That's just as important as the fact that they have this database to begin with. So one of the things that's tracked inside the database is who attends briefings, whether or not certain senators or congresspeople received those briefings, what they were briefed on, and so on and so forth. It's very interesting that the DoD keeps very strict track of that so that they can know who knows what at all times. So they bragged on this LinkedIn post, which I can provide in the sources at the end of this presentation, as to the closure rate improvement that they had, the number of senior directorates that were spanned by their system, and so on and so forth. Shout out to Mike Knowles, senior legislative analyst. Lock your stuff down, Mike, but not right away. So the 4th lever, and this is the final lever, is the fact that David carries a dual authority structure. He has the ability to coordinate responses within the DoD at multiple levels by himself, which is extremely important and very, very well outside of the norm, okay? The authority 1 under OUSDINS for congressional activities. AARO reports to him, and then he reports to the Secretary of Defense per 50 USC 3373. Intel Special Access Program Central Office is the cognizant authority for all DoD intelligence SAPs. He runs that. He determines the Intelligence and Surveillance Office's posture on congressional engagement and maintains a congressional tracking database. Now, under ASDLA, Intel Team, he's the OSD level coordinator for every DoD intelligence engagement with Congress. He's one of 5 Intel Team chiefs, but he's the only one titled director, which indicates that he has authority over all other legislative affairs chiefs, which means that this guy is sort of the point man for all DoD legislative affairs, aside from the Secretary of Defense. Okay? That should tell you a lot. So let's look at the Grush email here. There was an email sent from someone in the Armed Services staff who reached out to David and said, David, this being a UAP issue, which falls under intelligence and surveillance, and this being, I think, an IC employee, I think intelligence and surveillance would need to be tracking. And there is a deflection here. I'm not tracking the below, but I don't know if I would/should be. I'll discuss with redacted. I may defer to OIG. So it's important to note that when you're dealing with sensitive intelligence subjects, especially things you kind of want to kill, you're going to not want to be the person who is set up to be the guy in charge. There was a deflection here, and then there was a rebuff by the staffer, which is the reply that you see above, which indicates that, yes, you should be doing this. So go ahead, Gerb.
So, Rob, am I correct in saying that Kozik's name in this FOIA dump of emails was the FOIA selection that Arrow pressed when it was trying to discredit David Grush by trying to frame a narrative that they invited him numerous times to attend meetings, to which Arrow tried to frame that Grush ghosted them when it talks to them. So Kozak's name comes up in those emails, is what you're saying.
Yes, he does. Yes, he does. They refer to him in almost every single email chain regarding the UAP topic all the way back to 2017. And believe me, there are other FOIAs cooking right now to reveal that further. So that being said, so Section 1687 of the 2024 NDAA. Section 1687 created the post-Grush notification framework. The statute at written left those 2 terms left to executive interpretation. That signing statement, which was done, there was a signing statement that was issued by President Biden, specifically executive discretion to operationalize those terms was narrowly reserved. Okay. So there was a decision made by whoever was running the Biden administration and operating the auto pen at that time to make sure that they reserved executive authority in that respect. And that authority has obviously been moved on to whomever is in the current Oval Office. So keep that in mind. You know, there is an early documentation here of all the way back to 2020. This is December 2nd, 2020, that shows that he's dual-hatted. At this time, it looks like he's currently a chief. He has since, I believe, been promoted to director. So that's important to keep in mind. But, you know, there's a lot of things that we do know. There's a lot of things that we don't know. This is an ongoing case that I'm currently working. This is less than 24 hours old for me. I wanted to share it with you guys because this is, I feel, a big deal. This is a guy who has very likely been stymieing Congress on this subject for a very long time. And also, I would point out, has clearance authority over staffers.
So we got to ask ourselves here, Rob, why the USDINS? Because, of course, as you said, and as we know, Arrow reports directly to the USDINS. Former USDI Ron Moultrie and his good pal Sean Kirkpatrick from the get-go with Arrow, which was supposed to be something called the UAP JP. Oh, good. We're going to get to that. USDI has been awfully dismissive of this topic for a while. So please continue.
Right. So the point that I really wanted to make here today is why this matters, right? So congressional oversight of UAP absolutely depends on congressional access to UAP, which has been facilitated greatly by individuals like David Grush and other whistleblowers who have come forward. That access flows through people, individuals, not abstractions or rules that they can employ at any given time. Those rules can be rewritten by Congress, and there's all sorts of ways to do that. But the point here is that there are identifiable choke points, individuals within the process who have been stymieing this. We've heard over and over that there are these career, non-elected officials who have great degrees of authority over this issue. And I am happy to point out that, hey, we can stop just pointing at shadows and grasping at shadows. Here's a name for you. Here's a real person who does actually carry that authority, who has exercised that authority in a documented way over the course of many, many years since the beginning of the huge blow up that we've seen in the UAP topic. An individual who we know little to nothing about outside of this 2017 to present period, who has both a continuous and patterned, history of doing this, and is in principle accountable to Congress in a great number of ways. So by pointing this out, it's not just, putting somebody out there to be lambasted by the people. This is somebody that Congress can look to hold accountable, somebody that you could subpoena, that you could place under, threat of perjury in a situation where he would have to give testimony on the record, and you could get, real results out of this. As you'll note, like you mentioned with Ron Moultrie, I do have a nice little picture of Mr. Kozik here behind Ronald Moultrie overseeing a congressional hearing on UFOs in 2022. So anytime you see this guy, he is involved in the UAP subject generally. There are a lot of open questions that we still have, like what is Kozik's pre-December 2017 career trajectory? Who did he work for? Where did he come from? We have absolutely zero idea of that. The public record is currently dry, but I'm hoping that based on this presentation and the individuals that watch this, as well as some FOIA requests on my end, we can potentially put some pressure on Congress and on the government at large to tell us what this individual has been doing and whether or not this is, a concerted effort to suppress the subject and to intentionally minimize and sequester the definition of UAP and the authority that Congress has to prevent oversight of things that should be lawfully overseen.
Rob, I think what you presented is beautiful. Something that we were going to talk about as well is I do think there's been kind of an overbroad definition of the term gatekeeper, where that term has been kind of thrown around. Anybody who works in like SAPOC SRG or something is kind of labeled a gatekeeper. But I think you've laid out a beautiful thesis here. What I do want to draw attention to as well is so much of what you've discussed with dual-hatted roles. So what are you making a thesis here that individuals who might hold multiple senior executive service or senior executive official positions might be worth a double look?
Absolutely. Anytime an individual carries multiple authorities within multiple spheres of influence, it's always important to look at how those spheres of influence overlap and how someone could exercise that across them.
Sorry, Rob, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Two other individuals that hold multiple SES positions within the armed forces, specifically the Air Force, well, that would be the Vice President for Security himself at Northrop Grumman, Terry Phillips, who served dual SES roles as Executive Director of AFOSI PJ, Office of Special Projects, and the entire Department of the Air Force-wide SAP Security Director. And now his successor, Mr. Lee M. Russ. I would wager with full confidence that if this sort of disclosure push continues and some sort of documents and subjects are revealed, you'll start seeing a lot of more of Lee M. Russ, and hopefully in a similar vein, Terry Phillips is deposed for testimony. But continue, Rob. I'm sorry.
No. I mean, honestly, at this point, I'm finished. I've sort of laid out the entire thesis here, as well as all the supporting details. I just wanted to make sure that, there was at least a period of time on screen where we could have everybody see the sources here. If you guys are interested in links to the sources, I can provide them on my Twitter at some point in the future, as well as a copy of this presentation. So
please do. I saw multiple comments asking if they could, people could see those these slides. So I think that'd be wonderful.
Yeah. No, I'd be
Kerm, let's hear from you.
Wow, Rob, you impress me so much every day, man. Truly. I mean, general comments, and I think a lot of our viewers are probably thinking the same thing. It is crazy how this man just appears on the scene not too long after Glowing Auras and Dark Money, the infamous New York Times article, goes live to a national audience featuring leaked videos and new insiders. So, I understand that at least within this wonderful PowerPoint, by the way, oh my goodness, I was slobbering over the formatting, even though I imagine you probably put this together very quickly. It looks very professional. But even though the data might say, at least officially, there's only record of him appearing on, what was it, December 27th, 2017. I mean, we don't know, and we probably need to look into this more. It's possible he probably had that position a little bit earlier. I mean, it's just calling it what
entirely
it is.
Possible, yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's almost, it kind of goes back to like the themes of Immaculate Constellation, of that being kind of a reactionary USAP on the heels of, you know, this being outed within the New York Times. Is, well, there's probably multiple different interference operations all running at once, especially if this was like a oh crap moment and we need to do front. So that's all I'll say, is that it's very interesting that this guy kind of just literally appears out of nowhere. Like, as you said, he has no LinkedIn record whatsoever. And that's interesting for some reasons, but it's interesting.
Listen, I'm telling you, man, I have combed the public record on this guy all day, and I have been unable to find anything else whatsoever.
So that would strongly suggest, oh, sorry, Rob, my bad.
I mean, I spent like 5 hours looking for property records just so I could maybe find like a home valuation that was like outsized, if there was, you know, some sort of, you know, discrepancy there from what you might expect from a career SES individual. And I still couldn't even find that. So who knows, man?
That would strongly imply his work history is then data masked prior to 2017. If no online records exist of even property records or social media records and so forth. I mean, there's that to an extent, but also I would say that the career SES individual is a personality type that doesn't lend itself to having a very long online, you know, history. So, but at least a CV you can usually find for SES or DISIS guys, because boy, are they so far up their own rear ends. They're so proud of their service. I mean, you could go find Terry Phillips' CV right now on LinkedIn and find exactly what he was doing back in 2002. So he's so proud.
We got nothing for this individual whatsoever. So.
But the question remains still USDI. So this would mean with Kozik and Kirkpatrick and Arrow that USDI is employing several countermeasures to keep lawfully reporting to Congress at bay. It's deeply concerning.
I mean, absolutely, and it's definitely a concerted effort to manage the subject, and especially to manage the subject in such sort of a legalese way. It's very frustrating to watch, like when you see the pattern, because it's very clear that they're playing word games with Congress, much like we've known for a long time that Susan Goff does. You know, this individual is doing so at a much higher level than she is.
What was humorous to me about the photo you found of Kozik with Moultrie, as we know, Susan Goff has kind of been the holder of the leash for Kirkpatrick with his public appearances, whether it was speeches when he was at head of Arrow that our good friend Anthony took. I remember a famous picture, or Kirkpatrick testifying. Susan Goff was never far behind. I mean, I'd be intrigued if you could find more pictures of Moultrie testifying on the subject of UAP or whatever, if Kozik ain't far behind during his tenure as USDI.
Sure. Yeah, I'm sure that there's a lot of those out there. I started looking for them, but wasn't able to find too many aside from that 2022 hearing.
Yeah. And just to kind of like rehash something that was in the slides, that, I mean, I had seen a lot of these emails in the FOIA releases before, but I never really understood the significance. And I remember specifically that email where it's Goff telling Kozik, hey, just FYI, we don't want to add SUAS to Arrow's portfolio. And at the time, I'm thinking, oh, well, I guess that makes sense because they're looking for UFOs. They're looking for flying saucers. They're not looking for like Chinese drones or these other.
No, they're categorizing UAP, like actual UAP that we would be concerned with as SUAS.
Yeah, but I guess that's not really the point. I guess the larger point is that this email is truly record of them coordinating responses at every level of this kind of whole interference thing. So that's okay. I understand the context.
Yeah, another researcher on Twitter also a while back asked Goff if he could amend one of her statements to replace the word extraterrestrial with non-human intelligence, to which she said, absolutely not. You cannot change my statement. So that sort of mind games and legalese with wording is par for the course with these individuals.
Absolutely.
So after that powerful discussion of Mr. Kozik that, you know, as Rob correctly stated, he's not trying to dox this individual.
No.
He's not trying to call people to his home or anything like that. He's just trying to bring attention to gatekeepers within the subject. You know, I've done the same with Mr. Phillips and other individuals, and I stand by what I've done. I encourage people to kind of take Rob's work here with the same severity and start to press on this.
And like I said, my call is for accountability. This individual is theoretically accountable to Congress. So let's reach out to Congress. Let's talk to Congress if that's something you guys are interested in, and ask them to hold this individual accountable. If you feel the same as I do, that based on the available evidence, this person has been managing the subject in such a way to sort of reduce Congress's capability to provide, you know, proper oversight.
All right, that was beautiful. Again, Rob will be posting the full slide deck on Twitter, and please follow Rob Jones Reports. His Twitter is in the video description. Rob's always dropping great bombs in there, so highly recommend it. And Rob, if you want to say anything else, please do it, and then we'll shift gears to some stuff Kerm wants to talk about.
I mean, no, I mean, that was the crux of what I had there. You know, just, you know, please check out Reality Check with Ross Coulthart on NewsNation.
Okay, Kerm, you wanted to address some very specific things with the UFO file drop. Same as we did with Rob. Let's give you the floor, and just let me know if you want me to add any photos or slide decks or videos to stage, and kind of we'll let you rock.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I have the memo in question that I do want to talk about. It's pulled up on my screen, so I guess I can just do a share screen here.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. Please.
Okay, cool. All right. So I want to talk real quick about the alleged USS Eisenhower document. Is this visible for you guys? Can you guys see it?
It is now.
Okay, great. So I have Douglas Dean Johnson's Twitter pulled up. I have some kind of comments prepared, but Friday was a lot. There was a lot going on Friday. I think we all woke up at 8 a.m. and we were all searching all through the Pentagon's tranche of information, all 177 documents. But then a couple hours later, it was 176. What happened to this missing document? There was a lot of speculation. There was a lot of posting, but this document particularly stood out, not necessarily because it's authentic, but just because this was the only part of this document that was allegedly taking off the Pentagon site that people were able to pull, which there's kind of comments there. But ultimately, when this document started to get posted by, of course, Douglas Dean Johnson, but like guys like Truth Poll and these other kind of engagement kind of posts, I wanted to understand and figure out, where did this actually come from? So yesterday, on Saturday, when Gerb and I were leaving Washington to head back home, I was frantically messaging all sorts of people. I was literally doing an audit of this document. And so I'm going to be writing up my Substack. My first article will be roughly about this, but summarized, here's what I can say at this point. The first real mention of this document, as far as I can tell, is from a Reddit post. And I will link the original Reddit post when I write up my Substack. But I should point out that the original poster has deleted their account. No longer exists. Soon after that, it started to float through like some group chats, research discords, and then ultimately popped up onto Twitter, which we see here today. Now, within maybe an hour, 2-3 hours after this started to float on the interwebs, Douglas Dean Johnson took us through a deep dive of this document. And from his perspective, it indicates a forgery. So I just want to call out those things really quickly. As you can see in this screenshot here, there are two red boxes. The first one being at the top with the date, and the second at the bottom being the signature from P.F. Carter Jr., Vice Admiral, U.S. Navy, Director, Joint Staff. Okay. So what I will say about this document, what other people have told me, because I have never worked in the government, I've never worked in the U.S. military, never held a clearance, but the comment that I got from a couple of people was that the classification markings appeared correct, which typically with forged documents that we've seen before in this community, typically that is the dead giveaway that this document is legit or it's forged. So that being legit or checking out to folks that have experience with that, that was interesting. But even though someone may have done their homework on the classification markings, there are a couple of things which stick out. And it's really just where the red boxes are. So first off, the content of this document, and I don't want to read the whole thing just because I don't know if we have a ton of time, but the long and short of it is that there is this material that is in the possession of the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower, CVN-69, which is a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. According to this memo, it was conducting operations in the North Atlantic as part of the Sixth Fleet, and that it was transporting it in some classified redacted containment system, and that the commanding officer of the ship, a Captain James J.W. Jones, was executing orders as briefed about this thing. Okay. So the first thing that Douglas Gene Johnson pointed out, and others pointed out as well, was that at the time of this memo, 1985, the Dwight D. Eisenhower was actually in port in Norfolk, Virginia from the time of May to July of 1995. So, okay, it might be in that area of operations. And I asked the question, or I posed the question, is it ever possible, or does it ever happen that, like, I don't know, an aircraft carrier is taken out for a small little mission in between kind of deployments? And the answer is yes and no. But Rob, if you want to elaborate, because I know you're a Navy guy.
Well, no, I was just going to say, having operated out of the same home port, I would say that, there are occasionally times where an aircraft carrier is taken out for, pre-deployment workups, sea trials, things of that nature. There's a lot of different things that you have to go out and prepare in order to go on a deployment. But no, not in the way that they're describing here. That is abnormal.
Right. So not only is that abnormal, which that's really just more so on the dating of this document and lining it up kind of with what we understand to be the public record or the historical record of these ships, because the Navy, they track all this stuff. There's historical records, kind of like the same stuff that Gerb, Rob, and myself look through when we're trying to deep dive and research a lot of these, UFO concepts and understand how this stuff works. But not only that, you see at the bottom here, this red box over P.F. Carter Jr., yes, he was an admiral in the U.S. Navy, but as Douglas Gene points out, he did not actually begin his he did not actually become director of the Joint Staff until July 1st of 1985. So, okay, maybe he's like, okay, maybe he's stepping into this new role. I see it a lot in corporate. Again, never worked in government, but sometimes in corporate, you kind of get stepped up to the next level of responsibility without the job title. Maybe that's happening. Well, to me, I think what the smoking gun is here, or what I have the most issue with, is the captain of the boat, who through all of 1985, at least according to the record, is another person by the name of Captain Richard Chester Mack. There is a J.W. Jones. He does exist, but he was not the captain of an aircraft carrier. He was a captain, but he was not a commanding officer.
May I point out that? Sure. Well, never mind. Go on. That'll be a yes.
Okay. So all that said, all right. So we have this memo. It has interesting classification markings. The dates do not line up with what we understand to be the Dwight D. Eisenhower's deployment kind of schedule in 1985, and that's a matter of public record. The names of the crew, the commanding officer, and the vice admiral does not necessarily line up with what we understand to be the public record. Okay. So with all that, particularly in those comments that I just kind of talked about, Douglas Gene Johnson and others are under the impression that this is a forgery. So kind of questions, there's kind of questions that pop up of this as like, okay, was this actually on the Department of War's website? Like that's a question that I think is reasonable. Like, was this actually something from the Pentagon in this first tranche? Was this actually the missing document? So that's why I started DMing people like crazy of like, hey, you're saying online that you've seen this, and I just want to confirm that like this is you actually looked at this document. Though I have not gotten as many confirmations as I would like to be reasonably assured, I have heard at this point from multiple people that they did view this document at the URL before it went down. And so the best I can say is, we can say, okay, people saw this document, we can take them at their word, but then it kind of opens up a lot of bigger questions, because as we pointed out with this document, there are some inconsistencies with kind of what we understand about the Dwight Eisenhower and who is in charge of that ship versus what we're seeing in this document. And so I guess it begs the question, was this a forged or bogus document that was pushed into this tranche of UFO released information for whatever reason. And I guess, what does that say about potentially further releases down the road? So I will stop my TED Talk here. That's pretty much all I got to say. And of course, I will write my Substack kind of summarizing all this stuff, because like I said, I think people need to understand like where this stuff comes from, especially in like the age of AI, and stuff can just be fabricated so quickly. It's very important that we just ask like the very simple question of, where did this actually come from? And what I can tell you is, at least according to several people, they saw this document. I also have the original Reddit post that has now since, or at least the author has since deleted their account. So at least I know that that was the earliest mentions of it online. And though I was not able to see the document personally, I can't go back in time or do a Wayback Machine. I don't know if we can do that with this stuff, but at this point, I am personally of the opinion that this may have been bogus information entered in with this first tranche. Because also, and sorry for rambling more, but a lot of the documents that were released were from the 40s and 50s, from the early time frame. This has no relation or kind of correlation to that stuff. If we are to believe that this tranche of information is segmented, this is alien, essentially, compared to a lot of the stuff that we've seen, with the exception of maybe the videos, which are a little bit more new. But I'll stop there.
I will say it's telling that it was not only, put out there, but then also retracted, seemingly after it got a little bit of traction and people figured out what it was.
It got retracted pretty quickly too, huh? Within like 2-3 hours, maybe. It was by the afternoon in Eastern time, it was already gone.
Mm-hmm.
Having spoken to Marek, by the time he went back to look for it after they determined it was a fake, it was no longer available.
Okay, so Gerb, so Marek told you that he viewed this. Okay, cool.
Yes,
that was
he
one.
did.
That was one of the folks I was looking.
He personally verified to me that he did view this and provided the URL at which he viewed it. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, again, it's like, we can take these folks at their word and like, yes, there was a document, but again, it opens up wider questions of like, what really was this all about and why was it in the official release,
Yeah. So Kerm, now that you're going to be writing an article about this, what are your next steps to kind of explore is the document a fake? Why was it uploaded? And so forth.
I will say I'll push back. I feel like my role in this is more so to be kind of an auditor, a gumshoe auditor, and largely the conclusions, those are up to the decision makers. I just want to prove what has happened and to provide substantive evidence of like, hey, this thing occurred. It posted on this website. Conclusions as far as like I can try to directly say like what might have happened or the intentions. Again, I'm not really good at understanding or deciphering those things. But that's really, I think, the direction of kind of where I'm going with like my Substack and stuff that I want to put out in the future.
Alongside this document, were there any more in the file drop that did catch your eye initially?
Yeah, initially I will say the Air Material Command memos, because I know Gerb, you've talked or discussed about like certain aspects of the Air Force and the Hidden Wing particularly. I for one, at least, I was pleasantly surprised to see Curtis LeMay's signature in response back to some of these like initial inquiries about, oh, well, maybe a lot of these sightings by the pilots is just advanced technology. And Curtis LeMay is responding back saying, nope, this ain't anything in our vaults, and signs off. And, we hear Curtis LeMay as one of these kind of boogeymen, particularly on the Air Force side, that's knee deep in this stuff, especially in the early years. So I was like, interesting that they like doxed LeMay like that and put him in this file release. But Galactic Troubadour on Twitter was very quick to point out to me, no, actually, a lot of these records have been out previously. And I'll do you one better because he actually linked me the original NICAP database. So again, shout out my boy Galactic Troubadour. You keep me honest.
Double shout out, because the person I was referencing earlier that gave me part of the idea for my research and my presentation is also the same person. I don't want to say his name because I know his name, but like, dude, you're a G.
Galactic Troubadour, shout out that man.
Yep.
Wherever you are.
Yeah. With Air Material Command, lest we forget that in 1947, AMC was looking for Nazi scientists from Operation Paperclip for their underground plant program. A bit curious, not quite sure what happened there. And also Curtis LeMay, it was Barry Goldwater who kind of drew his name infamously into the subject, right? I remember a famous video of Barry Goldwater inquiring into specific areas of Wright-Patterson where Curtis LeMay chewed him out. And also some other folks have talked about old Mr. LeMay. So you were interested in AMC. Were there any other files, Kermit, that kind of stood out to you right away?
I think it's more of a discussion about like the videos. I think the NASA transcripts were pretty interesting, seeing kind of the reporting that NASA's like, oh, well, we've never seen anything, but then, the astronauts are seeing some pretty interesting things. I don't know if I would say like they saw, flying saucers, UFOs, like technology craft. I guess space is weird. Space is interesting. We've only been up there so many times. Very few people that have been alive have ever been up there. So I would like to discuss the videos. I think some of those were particularly interesting, but I mean, in terms of documents, I think once Troubadour let me know that a lot of the stuff has been out previously, I started to become doomer pilled, kind of like with what happened with certain files releases of prior administrative efforts of this president.
Yeah, so I guess the next big push is Luna has been pretty outspoken. She wants those specific 46 videos that have been kind of infamous in this subject for a while released. That will be interesting. There's, I think, a Jeremy Corbell Sleeping Dog documentary released 8 of those 46 as well. My concern with that video set is, while there's plenty of interesting videos, none of them are specifically the smoking gun people like to refer to as. And a lot of that stuff kind of exists still in what you might call the low information zone, where there will be Twitter battles on the veracity and legitimacy of the videos. What is it? The gimbal video that Marek and Mick West are still debating to this day after years and years. I just worry that I think there will be more videos that kind of produce those same discussions. There are some interesting ones, but those, of course, don't lend to the mission I'm trying to service about the legacy programs. But we'll see. I think the public would clamor for that. And as you mentioned, with 500 million views within 24 hours on the Department of War's drops, there is certainly an appetite. Kerm, I think you're muted.
Yeah, I was just going to say definitely. Here, ditto, all that.
So this will be fun because this is a fun one. Why don't we shift gears now to the National Press Club event that we all had a ball
Let's do it.
Attending. But I got to thank both of you guys for presenting your brief. Yeah, well, first I got to thank both of you guys for presenting your great research. Again, that's Rob Jones Reports on Twitter, Kerm Ent on Twitter. Kerm, do you have a name picked out for your Substack when you start it, just so people can keep an eye out for when it drops?
Yeah, I think it's going to be Frog and Badger. I'll call out to old habits. So, yeah, something along those lines. Real ones on Reddit know me as that.
Sure. So, okay. So May 8th, Greer had a National Press Club event. Infamously, he had his 2001 Press Club event, which in my opinion was fantastic. I often think to Mark McCandless speaking at that and plenty of other extremely intriguing individuals. Other testimonies that didn't quite make it include, of course, Mr. Jonathan Wegantz for the 2001 Press Club and a couple other individuals as well. Stephen Greer followed that up with a 2023 press conference that featured it featured Michael Herrera. It featured DC Long, a gentleman by that name. It featured a couple more guys than we had today, and we had the opportunity to go to that. I certainly wanted to attend just because the platform featured Mike Herrera, Roderick Castle, who of course I've worked with, and Mr. Randy Anderson, who I've worked with kind of infamously. He, if nobody knows, somehow he is the RA pseudonym in my Off-World Technologies video back from quite a while ago. So let's go through it. What did you guys think? And no, we didn't see any Jake Barbers red teaming the event. If there were, they would have been very well hidden.
I'm a tall guy.
I could have since last summer. So
yeah. Well, I was looking for it in the crowd. I'm like, I wonder, but my radar wasn't going off, unfortunately. I also might need to get my radar checked. Who knows?
So what do you guys think of the event?
Okay. I'll start. No. I'll start. Okay. Let me say in the nicest way possible that I did greatly appreciate the enthusiasm and joy that came from all of the people that attended. Everybody that attended was definitely there to see and support, and that was cool. I will say I was disappointed, as I expected to be, in Dr. Greer's tendency to make everything about himself and to take certain events and things and make them about himself when they certainly are not. I will try and remain vague there without like casting specific stones. I was also a little bit disappointed in the sense that the advertisement was a little bit disingenuous. They advertised the event as having an additional whistleblower that was, never seen before. When in reality, you and I both know that, the person that was being touted as that additional whistleblower was was Randy Anderson, who's been platformed not only by you, Gerb, but also by Jesse Michaels, and his story is known, to the public at large. So advertising it that way was a bit disingenuous, in my opinion. Aside from that, I enjoyed what I could. I was happy to support Michael and Roderick and Randy, in terms of what we could there. I'll leave my comments on Jaime Malson and others to private channels, but it is what it is. I'm glad I got a press pass.
Kerm?
Yeah, I would say overall, like, especially in the context of the files release, like it was interesting. And of course, I mentioned previously that it was a coincidence, and even Greer kind of admitted that as well during the opening statements. In so many words, like, I support the guys at the end of the day that are, sharing their experience and that they are trying to go the right way about, informing our authorities, our legislative authorities. It's one thing to go to the Pentagon or the IG. It's another thing to brief Congress and, that whole avenue. And it was good to hear from the witnesses that all of them were prepared to repeat that testimony to Congress if they are called. So that was really good and very positive to hear. On the other hand, like, we get towards the end of the discussion or this conference, and he holds up a binder. And I mean, look, he had the binder on the Kim Kardashian podcast. He's shown it around. It's the Disclosure Project binder. It's on the internet, allegedly. But he holds it up and he's like, this is all the information that we have received from decades of research and investigation, from all the interviews that I've done with these witnesses. And you can buy a redacted version of this document online on the Disclosure Project archive. So to me, it was ironic for a couple of reasons. First off, this is why I love Gerb. He doesn't gatekeep or sell information behind a paywall. So that's what's going on there. But second, he spends, like, it was ironic to me because it's like you spend so much time covering this international illegal organization saying that, whistleblowers that have NDAs under these programs, they aren't legal because these programs aren't legal. But then at the same time, it's like, okay, you say all that, but then you're selling a redacted copy of this information that you think needs to be out there for humanity. It's like, to me, it just didn't make sense. It didn't really couch. And I thought it was, it's an obvious kind of grift, but these are things that I think we all kind of understand implicitly or explicitly. So that's all I have to say. The Boogosphere, don't get me started on that. I thought the videos were interesting. It's not
do get me started on that.
Okay. But
I have a comment.
I will say before you jump in, it was interesting to me, the university that did the spectrometer study, and I actually called the department. I said, hey, did this actually happen? Again, kind of like this audit with this document that I did previously. And all I can really say is they were not specifically aware that it was the Boogosphere, and that they kind of gave me this blanketed response of, well, we perform a lot of these studies kind of in the blind, like we don't really know what we're looking at. And then we provide the report kind of confidentially through this like sort of scientific process, right? It's trying to eliminate bias kind of in that, which I understand, but that doesn't really say all that much. Sorry. That's all I got.
Rob, before you jump into the Boogosphere, can I make one comment on the disclosure briefing document book? So I own that. It's back here. I actually purchased that, and I also purchased that as a gift for some friends for Christmas who actually have experience within the legacy program structure. They thought it was hilarious. One of the things that Greer spoke on was, he said in his archive that he's passed on to law enforcement are exact GPS for deep underground military base access points. If you go in his book, and I'll post pictures of it, or I'll post them in Discord after this. If you look at those pictures, specifically the Dugway photo, that is just a screenshotted JPEG of something that I took and put it in his book. I screenshotted the alleged entrance to the Dugway stiff entrance, and that some people sent it over to Greer, and Greer included it in his book. So I guess I should just be honored that my work is included in there. And so I could send you the image, and then I can send you on my computer.
Oh man, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Love this community.
So okay, but you guys want to talk about the Boogosphere? I'll sit and listen. So let's hear it.
I've said my piece about Booga.
My only statement on that is that, you know, there were a lot of insinuations within the advertisement that the Boogosphere would be presented, right? And it obviously was not. Otherwise, I would have been talking about it and I would have taken a picture with it because I've always wanted to do that.
I was waiting for that.
But I do believe personally that the reason the Boogosphere was not brought to the United States was because of the messaging around the Boogosphere has been that there have been attempts to seize or confiscate the device. And then they would then have to explain, if they did bring it to the United States, how they got it through customs. And then they would either A, have to say, oh, we committed a felony, or B, say that we got it through customs, no problem, and nobody seized it. So it's either a hole in their story or a federal crime, one or the other. So you just leave it at home.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I just wasn't interested in the Boogosphere section. It took up a lot. It took up about 30 minutes of the 2 hours we had there, and I personally thought that was too much discussion. And the actual witnesses there barely got time to talk. Roger Castle, his discussion, for example, was about 7 to 12 minutes long. Randy Anderson clearly was uncomfortable. He didn't want to be there. His section was also another 5 to 10 minutes long.
Less than that.
Yeah. Actually, probably you're right. He
spoke about probably for the shortest amount of all the witnesses. Sorry to cut you off.
No, you're totally fine. And Rob, you talked about the touting of another whistleblower. There was also promise of another Green Beret whistleblower who saw the Tic Tac in Afghanistan. That was just an AI image and discussion of that. What maybe we could talk about a little bit is, of course, Greer outlines his thesis for the legacy program structure and history. I myself have many disagreements with that. Maybe we could talk about that a little bit and see where what you guys thought of Greer's discussion points, maybe where you disagree, maybe where you agree, and so forth.
Well, I mean, I agreed with most of his discussion points with regards to, you know, congressional oversight and things like that. I mean, he's touting things that you and I have heard from other places, right? None of this is new information, and the phrasing certainly isn't his own in a lot of cases, in my opinion. I hate to be overly critical here, but I mean, I'm just going to let it fly. You know, I'm not a big fan of plagiarism. And it does feel like a lot of his like statements and things were plagiarized out of other people's, you know, ideas or
thank you, Probe.
You know, concepts. Wow, shout out for the 5.
Yeah, thank you very much. Sorry, Rob.
Sick.
Thank you.
No. It's, you know, as a former streamer, you always have to shout out gifters. Like shout out to the Oilers in chat. But anyways, you know, I didn't disagree with most of what he said, but, you know, I just didn't like the fact that it did seem like copy-pasted comments from other individuals, and he certainly felt like he was reading them. There was a bit of, like, weird optimism of, like, free energy, like, utopian society afterwards type messaging that I didn't entirely agree with. I don't think that free energy solves human greed issues. I don't think that you know, free energy solves a lot of problems with human beings. It's certainly a step in the right direction, and don't get me wrong, energy independence is always a good thing. But yeah, it was interesting.
You know, that was Andy McGrillen from that UFO podcast last week on Night Shift's Doomer Friday. He had some poignant points about the revelations of zero-point energy systems or free energy, how it's not just magically some love and light scenario, but various companies or structures, they'll still figure out a way to charge you.
That's right.
One of the things I disagreed with, and, you know, this isn't criticizing Greer, this is just disagreeing with him. A huge inflection point for his understanding and his discussion of the legacy programs is he says, and of course plays the infamous Eisenhower quote, that Eisenhower lost control of the legacy program apparatus and thus gave his famous military industrial complex quote. I disagree with that vehemently. As I've stated in my most recent project, I am aware of information and I fully theorize that Eisenhower was the president that established the largest infrastructure for the legacy programs. In my opinion, his statements were he might have been aware of some of the power, some of the abilities that such programs sequestered under the National Security Council, who didn't necessarily adhere to traditional reporting channels and traditional U.S. government law, may have been weary of such power such programs could grasp in the future. But I fully disagree with that statement. I do not think that Eisenhower lost control of these programs, because the control group that Eisenhower established, allegedly the National Security Council's 5412 Committee Special Group, as far as I understand, that same control group was operational during Nixon's 303 Committee, which was the evolution of the 5412. That is what you could ostensibly refer to as MAJ 12, that sort of group hidden within the National Security Council. And I'll do you one better before I want to hear from you, Gerb. That's me. I mean, Kerm, sorry. Got tongue-tied. In Dave Grush's Judicial Watch interview, he talked about Eisenhower and Truman, of course, being sort of the impetus for the program structure. Loved that. That was great to hear. But when talking about the early days of the programs, he also talked about, he said, you know, there's 5 people within the National Security Council that knew about this at one point. Well, the 5412 Committee Special Group, guess how many people that was? It was 5 people. And so in my opinion, you know, Dave gives a lot of stuff for audiences to distill and kind of run with. And I believe that was a little bit of a cheeky wink from him without saying too much about the NSC 5412 Special Group being a very paramount control group for this structure. What did you guys think? Sorry, I just rambled for a bit.
No, it's all good. I honestly like the whole concept of Greer's of like, oh yeah, Eisenhower lost control of the program. Like, okay, you say that, but it doesn't really make sense, because this is the 4-star general who beat the Nazis. So if there is such a program that exists deep within the bowels of the military intelligence enterprise, well, they probably had a lot of dadgum respect for the guy that like won World War II in the Western theater. You know,
that was venerated, man.
Venerated, yes, for sure. So, you know, we talk a lot about presidents not having need to know, and like, oh, well, this president didn't get briefed, or maybe they killed JFK over this stuff. But at least for Eisenhower, he was very much respected. So it doesn't make sense to me at all that like deep state gonna deep state and try to hide this from like the guy. Like this is the guy that like not only was in charge of the military establishment during the most like pivotal war in our nation's history, he also then became the president. He's the commander in chief. Like I'm sure there were a lot of guys that were in the military during this time that were like, oh my gosh, I'm going to join up because Dwight's the president. Like they look up to him. He's a figure. Truly, he's one of the most consequential national figures in this country. It just doesn't couch to me that like he would not be privy of these things, or at the very least he would have been able to enforce change or build the structure and then like meet a lot of the same resistance that, you know, recent administrations have. But that, you know, again, just kind of shooting from the hip there.
Yeah, I agree with you fully. Scrums, also, could you please link the Discord in the description? I mean, in the comments. There's a lot of people asking about it.
I got it.
Okay, thanks, Rob. No, Kerm, I fully agree with you. And one step further, again, I believe vehemently that Truman and Eisenhower actually established the basically program oversight structure for the legacy apparatus. As I kind of stated, I mean, a huge outline of my last video, it was kind of changing SAP, or at that time, black programs, expansions, oversight reforms that led to the sort of morphine of the legacy program structure, which kind of crescendoed in 1983 with 1982's Executive Order 13256, National Security Decision Memorandum 159, and the revolutions of the Yellow Fruit, our unacknowledged special access program out of the Army Special Operations Division. This led to massive SAP reforms, massive. And in my understanding, the legacy program structure was forced to kind of amputate itself, break itself apart, hide and cover offices, hide and cover programs like the SAF-AA, or administrative assistant to the Secretary of the Air Force. And then I've seen some comments about it. And yes, I'm directly asserting that in 1994, there was a concentrated effort to completely remove the legacy program control group from the executive branch, invested in a quasi-government and industry control group of just over 24 people, where the newly created Special Access Program Oversight Committee and their senior review group were the gatekeeping structure to this new control group that was vested in a weird way. And when I say quasi-industry and government, by industry, I mean the FFRDCs, I mean the MITREs, the Lincoln Labs, and, you know, maybe a guy from Lockheed and Northrop too. But yeah, that's directly what I'm asserting with that thesis. So no, I disagree with Greer's statements quite a bit that Eisenhower lost control. What else? You know what? Maybe you remember this, Kerm, specifically, but Mike Herrera, when he was speaking, he made a very specific assertion about the exact type of EMP electromagnetic pulse weapon system that he stated was used to down craft.
Yes, the Epirus system, which I am blanking on the contractor that built it, but yeah, interesting that's
no, that's the name of the contractor. That's the name of the contractor, Epirus. He's the CEO is a guy named Andy Lowry, who is actually a student of noetic sciences at CIHS right now. He recently gave a Sean Ryan interview where he's actually studying the UAP and consciousness subject.
Huh. Well, that is interesting. Yeah,
they use pulsed. They develop pulsed microwave weaponry.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to Herrera's point, when he was speaking at the conference, the Epirus system has a dual use, allegedly, apparently. So yeah, interesting that this guy is in this noetic science group. I think I remember seeing. I think I remember going down this rabbit hole on this particular person, but I'm blanking on the name specifically. Yeah, interesting, odd.
And of course, another thing that Greer talked about, which I disagree with, both the application of such a practice as well as this actually happening. He is still pretty adamant that there are federal forces that are planning to, with arms, storm deep underground military bases and subterranean facilities. I think that, one, that is horrible operational security, and two, that is a terrible practice. I mean, if you have an elevator down to a facility in the middle of the Dugway Proving Ground near Granite Peak, for example, and you send some armed men in there, that's just a kill box waiting to happen. I'm surprised he's still pushing that since like 2023, I think.
Yeah, and to the point about 2023, and I vaguely remember there was a document that like kind of floated within kind of the niche schizo UFO community of basically it was like a listing of all the locations and then timelines of when these raids would occur. And the raids, as far as I can tell, did not occur. This is like, I want to say summer of 2024. And I remember some folks initially were like, oh goodness, like they're actually going to do it. But then no, it didn't happen. So I'd be surprised if Greer's able to pull it off of like, oh, we're going to take these special forces raiders and we're going to go after the dumbs, but didn't happen back then. Also, like, remember the whole Area 51 meme story, Storm Area 51, and the Air Force like threatened to bomb the public. Like, okay, good luck. We'll see how that goes. I'm not trying to run point for anybody, but like, yes, it's very odd. And it's not going to happen.
One of the things Rob brought up that I was really encouraged, though, is the people there at the event were great. Yeah, you know, multiple people came up to us. Rob, we ran out to the restroom. Multiple people came up, said hi, started up a chat. Wonderful people we met there.
Dude, really, you were famous there.
Yeah.
No, there were just some good people. There were just some great folks. Let's continue with, I do want to revisit Randy Anderson's testimony because I don't want to get this lost in the sauce, because I do think the Naval Surface Warfare Center in Crane, Indiana is such an important place that will continue to arise in the community zeitgeist. Randy spoke about his experience at Crane. He kind of made it comical that he received so much flack from individuals for stating that there was a sign that said Off-World Technologies. He said, hey, I was just as confused as you people. I don't know why that happened. But again, in Randy's testimony, quite literally under Crane in an elevator that took surprisingly long to go underground, there was quite literally a sign that said Off-World Technologies. Okay. And Randy, once he went public, he received some flack for some addiction he faced. I just want to remind folks that like Randy was clearly struggling with PTSD and issues from his extensive service. That man is in a better place now. He sought help for those issues, and Randy's one strong man, and he's quite the warrior. Big fan of Randy. He's a great guy.
I'm sorry, Gerb, just to elaborate on that, because just I hear it too much. So did those attacks come out kind of after the Off-World Tech divisions? Like, I just want to get a sense of
no, because at that point I had very little visibility. So the timeline of events is I put out the Off-World Technologies division video. Randy did not want to be public at that time. Right. Over the course of time, he changed his mind. So then he went on Jesse Michaels' platform. They asked me to take my video down just due to max exposure for that, which I did for a little bit, just, to be nice out of respect for Randy. But then immediately after that is when kind of similar to a clip and steam type vein, people, brought out. Go ahead, Rob.
Like David said in his interview, David Grush said in his interview with Judicial Watch just this last Friday, attacking the person and creating the whisper campaign is a big part of trying to discredit the message. Whether that incident in their lives affects their story whatsoever doesn't matter. It can absolutely sully it in the minds of the individuals who take that in. So just keep that in mind, that that person's experience and whatever they went through, and then their experience that they had while they were in service, are not necessarily connected in any way, shape, or form. So you don't have to have one invalidate the other.
And that just seems to be the playbook, right? If some of these veterans have struggled with PTSD or addiction issues in the past, you just try and draw attention to that. In the Judicial Watch interview, David Grush also defiantly stated that he has no shame. He struggled with PTSD.
Yeah. I think anybody in the service does in some respect, whether it's directly, combat related, or the associated, experience of just being in the service is pretty impressive. So.
Okay, fellas, how about this? I want you, if you guys have any more remarks about Greer or the weekend, I want to hear them. And then we have plenty of questions to go through. And I would also love to ask the chat if they have some questions. We'll try to get to them, but make sure you put them in all caps, please. And I'll ask you guys for help finding some as well, but picking them out. And if you guys have anything else to say, let's hear it now. Otherwise, we'll go to some Q&A.
Now let's do it.
No comments from accounting.
Okay. First question here is from a friend of the channels, a great guy, a gentleman by the name of Alex Katz. Mr. Katz wrote a fantastic Substack article talking about the alleged SES2 gatekeeper in the released Christopher Mellon texts, where Chris Mellon and one other person were talking about an individual who was gatekeeping Air Force programs, and Katz volunteered the name Mr. Russell Weiler out of SAF AAH, now known as SAF OC, the Office of Competitive Activities. So, Mr. Katz, this is very poignant, so thank you for asking this. Have you all been hearing anything similar to what Chris Sharp and Matt Ford have reported re PDD&I, Principal Deputy Director for National Intelligence, Aaron Lucas, allegedly obstructing the president's directive? I have quite a few thoughts on this, so I'm here for you.
I have thoughts first. Too.
I have TV static. You go ahead.
I would like to hear your thoughts first, Gerb, before I say mine.
Okay, so I have already seen the kind of rumor mill on Twitter and so forth, swirl calling Lucas a gatekeeper for the legacy programs. I'm not sure I'd go so far as to say that yet. I am aware that Aaron Lucas, whether due to ineptitude or something more nefarious, has not necessarily been receptive to the president's directive. Maybe he's running direct interference, or maybe he wants to save some glory from himself to lead a disclosure movement from an OD&I perspective. So I don't know if he is operating on behalf of the legacy structure, but I am aware that there have been problems with Lucas heeding the call for the president's directives and sorts of disclosure pushes. So more information needs to come out, but yes, Lucas has not been performing his duties as PDD&I as mandated.
Right. So I've heard that. I've also heard from multiple separate sources that the Aaron Lucas story might not be exactly the way that it was described. My understanding, based on discussions with some officials, is that OD&I was purged when Tulsi Gabbard came in, and a lot of the old, staffers were kicked out. And Lucas was one of the individuals that was brought in to help sort of, see her mandate through. So I don't know what to think of the situation. That's why I sort of made some of the posts that I did. I'm not sure who to believe in all of this, but I tend to lean towards Chris, even though the sources I've talked to said that that's not necessarily accurate. It's hard to say. It's, unless we know what's going through his head in terms of why that compliance isn't taking place, far be it from us. But that goes back to what I talked about with Mr. David Kozik, is that it sort of is incumbent upon Congress to hold these individuals accountable if they feel like they're being roadblocks.
Yeah, well said. Again, not sure, have no information if Lucas is actually gatekeeping. However, okay, great. Now there's been discussion brought to his name. Let's have him meet with Burleson. Let's have him meet with Gabbard or individuals in the executive branch.
I would say even better than that. I would say that really what a lot of these representatives need to do is to go back to the way that things were done during the times of like the Church Commission and other commissions back in the past, where the lawmakers are not the individuals asking the questions. The lawmakers are on the bench, and instead the litigator is the one asking the questions and leading, the subpoena. I would say that that was a much more effective method of doing this. And I don't know why it changed, whether it was for publicity purposes or what have you. More than likely, yes. But I do believe that that is the format that they should try and harken back to in the future.
Well said. So yeah, I think I know, Kerm, you didn't have much to add to this question, but Rob and I are both saying there needs to be more information about Lucas. Not going to call him a gatekeeper yet, though there are questions about sort of his activity. Okay, I want to hear from Kerm first on this one. From High Rolla Crush Official, what contractor do you secretly, now not so secretly, suspect is still sitting on the biggest quote unquote holy grail piece of non-human tech right now?
Amentum. I think it goes back to their acquisition of EG&G. I think a lot of this stuff, there's a lot of conversation about like who actually has custody of this stuff. I know we've talked about Lockheed Martin having a craft in their possession, and that's been a matter of congressional record at this point, which is kind of insane. That's interesting. That needs to be explored more. But I think the reason why I think there's all this like posturing and, people moving behind the scenes, namely like, techno factions aligned with like Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, that kind of group, is it's not so much about the craft. I think it is like the power kind of systems. I think that's like the energy from this, and it works both ways, right? Like literal power in the sense of like, hey, maybe this stuff is already plugged into our grid and you're still getting an electric bill, but they're not telling you about it. That's a possibility. Just throwing that out there, non-zero chance. But like also like figurative power, like whoever is able to control this stuff at the end, like once this musical chairs music kind of stops and then people are able to, get their hands on whatever. I think it's bigger than the craft. I think the craft is important. Selfishly, as a TR-3B guy and as a big fan of the advanced aerospace vehicles and those airframes, I would love to see that. It'd be cool if that'd be a part of the bicentennial flyover. But I think like the bigger stuff from this is related to power. And I would also go as far as to say, like, if we think about Dylan Borland's testimony and his statements that he made to Corbell and Knapp, like there is an integration aspect of this technology. And I think that the integration piece, that is very important. And I also think that would probably be the biggest issue should it disclose, because I think it's going to go against what a lot of people are kind of under the assumption of like, oh, we're going to see craft and the videos are going to be out. But like if this legacy program was really outed and those skeletons were really made to bear, I think that would concern people a lot more than like, okay, well, we're not alone and there's an on-earth presence and here's the videos and we have all the proof. Like I think the actual integration of this stuff, this covert activity into our normal way of life, I think that's a bigger holy crap moment to people versus like, a triangle in 4K. But I also am not other people. So what do you guys think?
Well, I personally am of the opinion that I think an FFRDC probably holds whatever holy grail piece we have. I don't think that a fully intact craft is probably given to contractors. That's just my opinion. I don't know if that's like based in reality or not. I would assume that someone like the Aerospace Corporation probably holds the holy grail to some of the cooler things out there, such as what Lakatsky described as being the craft that was larger on the inside than the outside, that they were able to penetrate the hull. I think that would represent a holy grail type object, but I don't know.
Yeah, for me, and quick thing, guys, these questions on screen now, I saw some people comment this. I know they're not in all caps. That's because on the last YouTube post, I just said, hey, leave some questions here for the Q&A. So next time I post one of those, make sure to leave some questions there. And then after these, I have, I think, 10 or 11 picked out. We'll get to the all caps question. So keep leaving them like that. I agree somewhat with what both of you said. I think the holy grail is not just the technology, but also the integration and knowledge, and perhaps how to squeeze as much as you can out of constraints for exploitation programs, which is the amount of NHI materials one might have. And so the most holy grail of all information, all materials, would be in an FFRDC DOE national lab. Sandia, Los Alamos, Lawrence Livermore, or the MITRE Corporation. But as far as a specific defense industrial based contractor, the biggest holy grail, I agree with you, Kermit, would be the kind of integration of the technology and exploitation of the technology, and that would be Northrop Grumman, the big bad guys.
And I will say this, just because you kind of put me on the spot and told me to name a group, and I think my momentum answer is interesting, and it's I was vague posting there, so I apologize. I think yes, momentum is important for a lot of the reasons. Another one as well, and I think you may have mentioned this, Battelle Memorial Institute as well, because we kind of hear that they may be associated with the biologic side, and I think we've kind of had this discussion a little bit in DC last weekend. Like, if we think about disclosure at a high level, like, you know, you can show a craft.
Kerm, you either muted or cut out. The last thing we heard was...
Sorry. I was waving my hands around like a freak, and I accidentally muted my mic. I apologize. So I think we've talked about this a little bit over the weekend, but when we talk about like disclosure high level, and I feel like I've said this, apologies, but with craft, like, I think it's easy. There's ways that the deep state, if you will, can hand wave away that as like it's prosaic human technology. It kind of goes back to, like, I'm thinking of Palmer Luckey's comment during that kind of infamous podcast where he's like, oh yeah, well, I've been out to the range, and, you know, we don't have like anti-gravity stuff, but there's a lot of stuff that's very interesting, and, like, you know, it's weird, you know. So with craft, there's like ways you can kind of hand wave that away, but it's a lot harder to like be definitive on something like biologics, like, non-human intelligence, a being of some sort, DNA evidence. And as far as I can tell, with what's been stated publicly over the past couple of years, Battelle, maybe Monsanto, but specifically Battelle, because they're kind of like this quasi private public 501c, you know, kind of not for profit, but they work exclusively with the US government on sensitive matters. That's where I would direct inquiries. And also, if you're looking for like a big disclosure, like, start knocking on those doors, and also maybe try thinking about like ways to hold those groups account, because as we've talked about before, they've used all these different channels to kind of keep people from asking those questions, or even asking the right questions.
Yeah, and I saw in the chat too, Alien Scientist also said Battelle, and I agree with both of you guys also for the historical implications of Battelle. Not only does Battelle manage multiple FFRDCs, but they also comprise 1/3 of Triad National Security LLC, which is the administrator for Los Alamos National Lab. But also, as we know, even back in the 40s, Battelle was kind of running their own parallel project, Grudge, Blue Book, and Stork with Grudge, Sign, and Blue Book with their own project Stork. And of course, there's a massive argument to be made that nitinol and other sort of interesting materials Battelle had quite a hand in the 40s and early 50s. Here's a good one. There's definitely some to unpack with. Lincoln Shoemate 5236 says, do you see the WikiLeaks connection between General Neil McCasland, John Podesta, Tom DeLonge, and a guy named Rob Weiss, who is executive VP of Skunkworks, I believe? Yeah, from Lockheed Skunkworks.
Yeah, I was going to say Rob Weiss is who I thought they were referring to, and yes.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, yes, we're all familiar with this.
Yeah.
And I think that those specific emails were of Tom DeLonge speaking about General McCasland, stating privately about the reality of UFO crashes such as Roswell, but publicly presenting himself as a skeptic because he has to. Am I on the right track with that email leak there?
That's
I believe
accurate.
so, yeah.
And I think this opens up the larger question that maybe we could talk about a bit too of General McCasland, who has now been missing for over nearly 2 months. His role within the legacy program structure, from what I understand, specifically at AFRL and serving high-level duties within, I think it was DoD SAPCO, the Special Access Program Central Office. McCasland was a pretty senior official in test and evaluation practices for the Air Force's legacy programs. This would have been a guy involved in the Hidden Wing program I outlined. Do you guys have any thoughts there?
Oh, I have a lot, but Rob, do you want to go first?
No, I'm just gonna say it makes perfect sense.
Yeah. So. And I will say, like, just to kind of further on that, and I know there's been a lot of discussion online about this missing scientist thing. It's been a giant news story. I'm not really here to like try to figure out what's the connection between all these people. Frankly, I don't think that there is like a tangible connection, but I think McCasland's case specifically and his disappearance warrants serious further investigation. Especially by the administration. But sorry,
I was going to say that is my understanding, based on conversations with a couple of confidential sources, that this administration is absolutely taking this, the McCasland disappearance specifically, as a national security issue.
Yeah,
as it should be.
Yeah, because this guy was like he was the director of the Air Force Research Laboratory at Wright-Patterson, which is like one of these cornerstone national security institutions. Like, okay,
he's also the chairman of the Special Access Program Oversight Committee.
Yep, that as well. My kind of thoughts on this, and I think we've probably talked about this before, and I'm sure other people have spoken about this. I look at McCasland's situation, and I also look at him being outed in the WikiLeaks emails. I look at that as evidence that in the past, this person was working with, Tom DeLonge, and then kind of by that loose affiliation, John Podesta, and then kind of Hillary Clinton's campaign. So it's not a direct linkage, but he was kind of through that like back channel, if you will. He was indirectly kind of working for Hillary Clinton, John Podesta, that side of the house. Now, that's relevant to me because especially when you have Donald Trump, posting on Truth Social it was literally a week before he disappears, saying, hey, we're going to start releasing these records based on a tremendous amount of interest. And then the guy that was caught on emails going back and forth with guys that were indirectly kind of affiliated with Clinton's campaign and that whole movement, he just goes AWOL. And my take on this, and I'm sure we'll probably have this as a discussion, but it makes sense to me that he was working with TTSA and that group in 2016, and he was kind of reluctant to speak. I think that's largely kind of seen in the emails, and like he's also couching himself as a skeptic. And then later on, once Trump, and at this point, McCasland's well retired at this point, and he's enjoying his retirement in New Mexico. 7 days before, Donald Trump's like, we're going to release the stuff. And, I'm not sure if, our UAP task force was probably, wanting to ask him questions about his involvement. I think that would have been a very solid line of inquiry about like, hey, like why were you going back and forth with TTSA and what was that all about? But all the same, he disappears within days of that. And it's not enough on the face to prove that like he, as Greer said, because Greer talked about this during the conference, like he had a whole kind of spiel about this missing scientist piece, but it's possible that he may have like taken himself off the game board, so to speak, but it's not like, I don't know. It's also potentially possible that like he may have been taken out, but I don't really want to like sit and speculate as to like what happened. But what I can say is like, based on the timeline and also what has been proven with the WikiLeaks emails, you could make a case that he was concerned that this was probably going to come out in a bad light. Because the one thing I can tell you, Trump hates Hillary, Trump hates the Clintons, all that thing. And if it could be proven with the stuff that's out there or in the record or it's classified that like he tried to work with that other side of the team, there's a way potentially that like, Trump's fixers and his political appointees can spin this of like, oh, well, we're going after this because this was some Clinton disclosure push, and that might be a way to couch it. But I feel like I've said too much and I've rambled a lot. So let me know if I need to elaborate at all.
No, I think you said that very eloquently.
I appreciate that.
Rob Jones, do you have any thoughts before we move on to the
None that Kermit hasn't pretty effectively expressed. So,
Gotcha. Before we continue, guys, there's just a couple of super chats. Let me just get through these. Got to be a gracious stream host, and then we'll keep going with the questions because I'm keeping an eye on the chat too. There are some really good questions in there too. So really looking forward to answering those.
Yeah, can I just say something really quickly? Do
Please.
not share individuals' personal details in the chat for any reason whatsoever. That's going to result in a permanent ban for you from the channel permanently. So
yeah, please listen to Rob and take that seriously. That's not condoned. Local HJ, thank you so much. Good question here too. Chaotic disclosure versus government control or whistleblowers before Congress. What's the best path forward? I'm sorry. How can average Joes help disclosure? I personally think somewhere in the middle between chaotic and government controlled disclosure is the solution. The next question we were going to get to is pretty much the same question. I think the current path we are on now with the file drops is not unless there's different things done, unless there's different players involved, and David Grush elevated to a very senior position, that there will likely be this disclosure effort will kind of fizzle out, or we may get the ATIP disclosure of a presence of a non-human intelligence. I think for a disclosure of legacy programs, there has to be a complete reorganization of oversight behind the scenes before any sort of disclosure process can occur. I think the kind of graybeards and old heads will go kicking and screaming before they allow a disclosure process to happen. I'm of the mind that maybe right now a carrot versus the stick might be the mentality. You promise some of these graybeards their oversight shifted, they can no longer run rampant and commit crimes, but they are now under the boot of the U.S. government, and the legacy program effort will become a national effort once again. At least I think that is the path forward. Before there's any sort of disclosure, there needs to be a complete reorganization of oversight for the programs. But I could go on and on about that. So let me hear you guys.
I mean, we all want like a UFO Snowden or something like that. But the problem is with the UFO Snowden that we've had plenty of whistleblowers that have come out. We had a UFO Snowden already, and he even did it the right way, unlike Snowden did. His name is David Grush. So we've already had that. I think that chaotic disclosure would really only happen with an NHI announcement or like an NHI like display of presence in some way, in my opinion, which I don't see happening personally. I mean, to be fair, I've never seen a UFO or UAP myself, so I don't see that happening a lot. I don't really envision it. I just have been unlucky maybe. But I would say that the best path is like consistent congressional pressure. The real problem here, like when we drill down to everything, is not necessarily that there are UFOs and aliens, which there are more than likely. The real problem, at least the material problem that I can see laid out in front of me, and one that I can actually attack as a human being and as a citizen of the United States, is the fact that there are currently programs, special access programs and controlled access programs that evade lawful congressional oversight and, take part in gross misappropriation of funds from the American taxpayer. And if you can't get behind trying to take care of those, then I don't know what I can tell you.
And the epitome of the government controlled disclosure plan are the slides that Carl Nell presented in the subsequent years of 2023 and 2024, which I don't agree with one bit, which is like a 35-year disclosure plan. So that's kind of why the somewhere in the middle. And as far as how average Joes can help disclosure, you're looking at 3 average Joes right now. As you can see, just kind of the severity with which Kerm approached some of the documents in the file dumps, critically analyzing them, vetting them, what Rob Jones has been doing, just looking at individuals that could possibly be involved with the gatekeeping structure, just responsible research and reporting that in a way people can digest and kind of understand. All the time on Twitter, there's folks doing incredible things and putting forth incredible stuff. So I'm just always super encouraged to see. And in the Discord as well, there's some super sharp people there that constantly share really great insights. So always encouraged by what I see from folks.
Yeah, I would just say don't be afraid to take things seriously and don't be afraid to get involved. It literally takes nothing more than, deciding that this is your passion and your spare time to eventually letting it evolve into, something more than that if the right opportunity arises. I mean, if I'm being perfectly honest with everyone in the chat, I was unemployed for a year before I got the job at NewsNation. So, things can happen if you actually go out there and do things. It's sort of a meme thing to say online, but like you can't actually just do things.
Yeah. And I will say, just to kind of follow up, like there are a lot of things that kind of average Joes can do. And, there's certainly a lot of groups that encourage congressional outreach. I think that's very important, letting it known to your elected representatives, the people that you vote for, that this is a topic of serious interest, and they shouldn't laugh this off. Right. I think that the UAP task force group, they are a good group, but my sense, especially from like my own local representatives, is that they don't really have clarity or really perspective on this, either because they're not on those committees or because largely the stigma kind of still exists of, oh, well, UFOs, conspiracy theories, like you must think like the Epstein files is something, whatever the case may be, they kind of label you with the tinfoil hat and they don't really want to take this seriously. But I think that that's changing. I don't really have like a finger on the pulse of Congress, but just based on how this has gone in the cycle so far, I think more and more representatives, like it's going to become unavoidable for them. It's kind of part to my comment about how many hits and downloads that the Pentagon had within a 24-hour period. Because not only the Pentagon's been put on notice, but our elected leaders and lawmakers have been put on notice that, like, yes, this is a topic of interest to the American people. And if you are not supporting this process, then you might get out primaried. You might not have your seat next term. It's saying a lot, and there's other issues in this country, and I'm not saying be a single issue voter on UFOs. That's not what I'm saying, but it is relevant, I think, to larger discussions because this is serious, right? Like this has become serious. And especially now with an executive office of the president that is retweeting and quote tweeting these videos from the Pentagon, as trivial or as funny as Trump's post about have fun and enjoy may be, we have literally never been here before. So we have to capitalize on that opportunity, on this opportunity that we have right now to make it known that, hey, this ain't going away. This ain't going to go the same way as the Epstein files, and we will hold y'all to account. I will say, like, you can do all that as well, but also just being knowledgeable of these things. Because another thing that I kind of witnessed firsthand was when these documents were released, I got maybe 30 texts from like all of my friends, family, coworkers, like people outside of this subject that are like, yo, dude, did you see these files? And what I have to do is I have to like kind of channel my autism a little bit to translate what's going on. And so I can let my friends know, like, yes, like acknowledge the receipt, but like, here's what's actually going on. I think it's going to be important, especially for people in this community, especially on this live stream, that we are able to articulate this stuff to our friends and family and just people that are interested in it. I'm not saying like you should go create a Substack or that you should be quote tweeting on every single, sports SEC burner account and say, oh, aliens are real. Not saying that, but just be calm and articulate and also understand what's going on. And if I can just plug my boys real quick, follow Rob, follow Gerb. They are great subject matters and great sources for a lot of this stuff. I am immensely proud of my man, Rob, for now having the gig at NewsNation. So follow along with them. But also there are other commentators and there are other people also working behind the scenes. And, at the end of the day, as this stuff comes out, it's going to be up to us to not let the public go all crazy. And we have to really be grounded in like what has happened in the research that has been out to date. Because it's really like we're in the audit mode, truly. And I apologize for rambling, but I think we are in the moment where like we have all the stuff that has been, and then the stuff is coming out, and it's our job to kind of reconcile and be like, okay, where did this thing go right? Where did we go wrong? Also, is there anything in this stuff potentially that might be called into question? And we kind of did that today on the live stream with this Eisenhower document as well. And we just got to keep doing it. So that's my 2 cents.
Just don't be afraid to make a PowerPoint. We saw a PowerPoint from Rob today. I mean, the whole reason my channel exists was a PowerPoint that none of my friends in real life showed up to view. So don't be afraid to make a PowerPoint. Let's get to this one, gang. Well said, Kerm, also. I think that was very well said.
Thank you.
Nicholas News ad 3726. Thank you very much, by the way. What do you guys think of Matthew Brown's assertions that exploiting the judicial branch and the legal system is the only path forward to disclosure of the crash retrieval program? I'm sorry. Who would like to start this?
So I will say that I think it's a strong path forward. You look at instances like the Area 51 settlement, which was the settlement in the 90s for Area 51 burn pit victims who were burning the Vanta black coating for the F-117 Nighthawk that was being run out of Tonopah Test Range. Those individuals formed a class action lawsuit and sued the federal government for injuries that they sustained during the process of maintaining those burn pits. So we have a clear precedent of that lawsuit actually resulting in the acknowledgement of Area 51 as an actual real location. So there is precedent. There's definitely a path there. Is it the only path? I'm not sure of that. I think that there are ways to actually reestablish lawful oversight. Are they easy? No, not at all. Is a lawsuit and lawfare potentially a great path forward? Absolutely.
Yeah. And I just to kind of echo that, I think it kind of goes back to the ongoing retaliation investigations, which are actively happening. One part of this equation is, individuals coming forward with relevant experience about these programs and testifying to the appropriate authorities, namely the congressional committees, about what they know and the substance of the programs and the extent of their knowledge. The second part, though, is Matthew Brown kind of talked about this dirty tricks department, which very much exists within these covert activities. And I can tell you, they are making people's lives miserable. They're making their lives hell. And it gets to a point that you go through the proper channels. You've done so much in that regard, trying to go the right way, but someone's got to be held to account. And also people need to be charged with crimes, because crimes are being committed, not necessarily in the name of the program, but they're being committed against people that are speaking out on the program. So that needs to be addressed. I don't understand why our federal tax dollars are going towards intimidating and silencing and potentially murdering individuals that are trying to do the appropriate lawful activity of disclosing this stuff. I think that's a bigger concern than, the wider implications of whether or not we're alone and the existence of this legacy program. It's how do we have a free country when there is a separate, I'm not saying it's a shadow government, but there is a separate mechanism by which people cannot speak out against this deep rot that has existed in this country for decades. So I'm fully in agreement and support with Matthew Brown on that aspect. And I know I know for the guys that have spoken out and that they have tried to go through the proper channels, their lives have been made hell. And at this point, all right, it's time to hold these people to account.
Yeah, I agree with what both of you said. I think that the judicial branch and the Department of Justice is a path forward. However, it is gonna be tricky, and it's gonna require a large effort. I mean, I'm familiar with instances in the past where the Department of Justice has literally been stonewalled in prosecuting major infractions within the legacy program. So, but I agree with what both of you guys said. We'll keep going here because
when a department denies your judge SAP read-in, that's what happens.
Fat rodents, you are insane. Thank you so much. I appreciate that from the bottom of my heart. Thank you so much.
Thanks, dude.
Perhaps Eyes says he or she does disagree with the statement on Grush's Snowden. Snowden delivered documents to the public. Grush takes closed-door meetings. Totally understand that. Dave Grush is an American patriot. He one of his concerns with an uncontrolled, unprotected disclosure, I'd imagine, is revealing asymmetrical warfare capabilities. So I do think he wants to keep national pride and national concern kind of in the back of his head while he made his disclosures. But still, the fact remains, Dave Grush is the most important person who has ever been public on this subject, and I would stand by that no matter what.
Yeah. Not quite the same as Snowden, but has made a significant effort to fulfill the same role without violating laws and getting himself in prison so that he can continue to fight that fight.
Jenny Flex T, thank you. You are a Gerbil indeed. And last of the super chats, Mr. AKA 1996. How much can you bench? I can bench 315 for 2 to 3 reps, but then again, I am 215 pounds. So it's not that impressive. It's not that impressive.
Better than most people.
Let's continue.
Don't ask what I can bench.
My number's classified.
I can bench multiple cases of beer.
Nice.
Okay, let's get to another one from Alex Katz, because this is a good one. If you were trying to locate a hidden subterranean facility whose top cover is an ordinary looking office building. Let me get that one back up. I'm so sorry. I had multiple questions on, so let me get that off. Let's restart this question from Katz. I'm so sorry, guys. If you were trying to locate a hidden subterranean facility whose top cover is an quote unquote ordinary look, I had this ticker on slow, so sorry.
Yeah.
Whose top cover is an ordinary looking office building / warehouse, are there any tells / tips of the hand to look? I'll just wait a second to look for. You know what? Let me read this while he says it. Okay, let's restart the question. If one were trying to locate a hidden subterranean facility whose top cover is an ordinary looking office building / warehouse, are there any tells / tips of the hand to look for that might distinguish it from an actual ordinary structure? I think this speaks to an interesting question. Kerm, we talked about this because you were talking about some statements I made about interesting SAP-Fs or facilities being hidden within civilian infrastructure, such as shopping malls. But Rob jumped at this question, so let's hear it.
I mean, you immediately want to look for like wells and boreholes that have been drilled in that area. There are usually county records for those things in almost every possible situation. They have to be recorded for structural reasons, for things around them. You're going to look for those buildings to be up against like certain geological features. But no, go on with what you guys were saying as well.
Yeah, so Kerm, you were asking about that. But one of the things that interests me that I would wager is that some subterranean facilities may have a top cover of a site that is made to appear derelict, made to appear abandoned, made to appear that nobody is kind of on the grounds, or that it's a place that is staged to look abandoned. That is something I have pretty decent confidence on.
Like South American facilities.
Yeah, and places in the Mojave and so forth like that.
Yep.
This is a good question. Maybe we can comment on thoughts on the secret space program, not the 20 and back crew. So, let me let one of you guys start this, because I actually do have some interesting thoughts.
Okay, so from a very real perspective, the secret space program was a thing. There was an actual separate space shuttle that was created under a classified space program that was run by the Air Force in the 1980s that was intended to operate out of Vandenberg Air Force Base at the time on the California coast. Is there a secret space program utilizing ARV vehicles? Gerb is probably a better person to weigh in on that. I think that possibly there was at some point. Whether they achieved anything or did anything of material value with that is highly questionable in my eyes. But again, I would defer to others.
Yeah, and before Gerb speaks the truth here, from what I understand, a lot of these assets are used for ISR, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. So, I mean, your secret space program defined, or at least what is kind of familiar in the zeitgeist, is like, they're going on these missions, they're communicating, or they're doing these missions with like presumably non-human intelligences. I'm very well familiar of kind of the 4chan whistleblowers line about how we have vehicles that can be in the solar system, but they can't quite leave the solar system. So I will say, like, it's as much of an open question as is like, the legacy program and all that stuff. And I know a lot of folks have said, well, actually, like, yes, we have some interesting materials and we have some recoveries, but like, we haven't figured out anything from that. And I think there's some particular names off the tip of all of our tongues here when I say that all is to say, like, I think there are assets. I think they are being utilized. I just don't think it is like, I just don't think it's like a completely off books, separate kind of secret space program being managed with, I remember Greer kind of had this quip about how they have $2,000 trillion in assets in this program.
He did say that. Yes.
Which is just
say that.
Account it here. That is such a cartoonish amount of money. It literally makes the economy not real. It doesn't.
Brown Brothers Harriman doesn't even have that much money.
No, like not even that much money has been printed by the United States government. Like, I don't even need to go through a full audit of that. I can just tell you, we've never even produced $2 quadrillion. So I don't know where you're getting that number from, brother. But I mean, okay, it's an international cabal, multiple governments, multiple economies, all that stuff. But at least as far as I know, and like, there's multiple levels to this, but I just don't think it's like a secret space program where like we're going to other star systems. I think it's like very limited in use, and it's largely dictated by the capability of the technology, which insiders have kind of alleged is it's there, but it's like kind of dog crap a little bit. But what do you think, Herb?
I think you guys made some great points as far as something I talk about a lot, which are alien reproduction vehicles. I prefer nowadays to use the term derivative technologies because I think that more not prosaic airframes, but human constructed airframes deploying one or two elements of non-human technology from technical vehicles is more commonplace than full-scale alien reproduction vehicles. I look at this as, you know, some UFOs are presumably extraterrestrial whose craft arrive from deep space travel or manipulation of wormholes or other physics-defying or insane physics quandaries. And that would be a deep space propulsion method. I'm still rather skeptical about that if humans have that capability to really traverse kind of outside of our solar system, really easily across our solar system, as you said. I think more of the capabilities that our derivative technologies are able to harness on an operational basis are internal mass reduction or anti-gravity, indefinite loiter time, extreme signature management, and inertial dampening and such like that. But that also calls into question the story of the flux liners, which, you know, for all I do think is a real story, and I do think there's plenty more to be told about Brad Sorensen. In the 1990 interview Brad Sorensen did with Bill Scott of Aviation Week and Space Technology, he stated that the three Mama, Papa, and Baby Bear flux liners on display at the 1988 Norton Air Force Base Air Show had traversed to different parts of our solar system. I'm still on the fence about that statement, although I do think it's possible, but maybe not on an operational basis. I'm still trying to think through that.
I have an opinion on that, and it's just that I think that the devices were probably capable of doing so. However, from a logistical standpoint, they lacked the actual like orbital mechanics planning crew that you would have from, like, say, a NASA mission to be able to plan such a space flight with an unguided spacecraft of that type. You know, I don't think that the instrumentation was sufficient to do that. However, the propulsion system may have been a, you know, proof of concept.
Yeah, I think you make a great point. And where are those flux liners now? That's anyone's guess. But yeah, I agree with you guys that
probably cannibalized for other stuff.
I think that in an operational capacity, the derivative tech we have made is not for glamorous cross-galactic travel and so forth. Let's look at this because. Oh, yeah, Kurt, go ahead.
I just wanted to add just real quick because I remember the McCandlish line being that the flux line was capable of light speed or better, which is kind of interesting. It kind of presumes that it is fast FTL capable.
Yeah. Well, you know, Brad is recorded by an individual stating that the craft is capable of traversing at multitudes the speed of light. So there's that. Rob, I know we chatted about this a little bit, and we kind of disagreed about it at the time. Do you think S4 is real, and if so, where do you think it's located?
I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know what to believe about those stories. There's so much smoke and mirrors regarding S4 and things of that nature that I have a hard time really placing a concrete opinion on it. I know that I expressed some hesitation previously, and a lot of that has to do with sort of reservations about Lazar's story, things of that nature. I just think it's an unknown for me, and I don't know whether or not I want to assign any sort of credence to it. The one thing that I had ever used as sort of a linchpin in my opinion previously regarding S4 was that Andy Jacobson at one point had produced a badge image from a purported S4 employee, but this is an EG&G badge from the National Nuclear Security Agency, and it's a categorized S4 badge, and S4 is actually a classification for specific type of employee under EG&G employee classifications. S1, 2, 3, and 4 were various different groups. S4 was photography, specifically for nuclear testing. I don't know if that is merely a conflation from that badge to other things, because that badge was only posted in the mid 2010s. So it obviously couldn't be a conflation just from that. But, you know, I'm not sure that I find a lot of the evidence super compelling, but I'm also willing to suspend my disbelief because there's just things that I can't disprove about those stories too. So.
Yeah. And I will like kind of add, I've been on the fence about S4, but I think I've been a little bit more skeptical about it, especially after learning about the Tonopah test range and about how they also have a S4 as well. And like that's known. Like, I mean, it is largely buried on the internet, but yes, there is an S4 facility. It is part of the Tonopah test range. I know, Gerb, you've done excellent research on this space, really put me onto it, about how they even have a separate security architecture, like separate like chain link fences, security badges, all that stuff to get there. Okay. So that's interesting. Now, I will say if it was real, I don't think it's called S4 anymore. So I don't know if there are congressional people on the chat or in the stream, but if they are like, hey, like, can we go to Area 51 S4? I seriously doubt that people are still there from like 30 years ago, 40 years ago. And also it might just be going by another name. Just throwing that out there, but that's all I got.
It's probably nothing tour, the one in Austin that Bob was at. I asked him if he was if he had made up the Tonopah S4, because that's a very real place that's on old Sandia maps. That's an open air place that Janet Airlines actually flies to amongst Area 6 and Area 51. And of course he said no. But I personally do believe that S4 is highly likely a real facility and in the immediate area of Groom. And I say that because of specifically 3 individuals who have claimed to me to have been there. None of these people are associated in any way with the Lazar story. And I do believe these people, and all 3 are separate from one another and have very similar accounts of the S4 facility, mainly just a door in the middle of a desert near Papoose Lake and hangar bays kind of built into the hillside. So I'm pretty good confidence with that. I've also seen some purported evidence of the existence of S4 physical materials. I haven't been able to fully yet vet that, but it is compelling on kind of first look. But again, I can't fully vet it or say it's true. How about this, gang? Because I think we all are kind of on the same page with this. Thoughts on the supposed hybrid breeding programs mentioned by Matt Gaetz. And I think it's important just to talk about this because I think it's important to kind of set a baseline on this.
Okay, so let me drill down on specifically what Matt Gaetz claimed there. Okay. Matt Gaetz used the phrase briefing. However, when we drilled down on the question, not we, but like other individuals drilled down on the question, Matt Gaetz later admitted that he was told of an individual who is an enlisted member of the armed forces.
E4, I think.
An E4, which, to be clear, I was an E4 when I got out of A school, which means this could be a 19-year-old kid for all you know. Okay. An E4 told him that he believes there is such a program, did not provide any evidence thereof, and did not provide any indication of, where to go look for this or anything of that nature. And instead, Matt ran with it as part of a story, knowing full well that it would get blown up because it would get him clicks because he's a podcaster now. That's just my opinion.
I think there's also a risk that the E4 in question, who was stationed at Eglin, was the gentleman by the initials of JP, who has appeared on the Redacted podcast. And I've listened to both parts of that story, and I do not find it credible. So I do worry that individual, JP, I can't remember his full name, was the source for that briefing. What do you think, Kerm?
I have no comments. I mean, largely, I think it's funny that Gaetz has been making the rounds talking about this. We talked about this particular individual and how like the soundbite and these clips kind of makes it seem like, oh my gosh, Matt Gaetz was told about a briefing program. But when you actually dig into it, it's a like the actual substance of the briefing. And he even kind of like talks about this even when he was responding to Benny Johnson. He's like, yeah, no, I had a guy come into my office in Tallahassee and tell me that he was in a military uniform. Like the way that he said it and like kind of the passive kind of voice delivery of it, it's he understood what to say to get the clip. But again, digging into it, it's like, well, this probably wasn't really as legitimate of a briefing as like we would probably think that it is. And, even still, he goes to Benny Johnson and has that, and it just, hits the airwaves. So I did get a couple of texts from my homies about that of like, oh, did you see this? And I'm like, hey, there's a reason why Matt Gaetz is not the attorney general. That was supposed to be the plan. For those of y'all who are unaware, Matt Gaetz was forced out of Congress for sexual harassment allegations pertaining to a underage staffer. So yeah, very interesting. I'm not here to like engage in ad hominem. I'm just here to tell you what happened. But yeah, it is tenuous, and of course, I think it's a reminder of like thinking critically and also kind of seeing past the soundbite as well.
Interestingly, his sister is married to Anduril founder Palmer Luckey.
I think I remember hearing about that.
Yeah.
Huh. Small world.
So guys, what do you say? We'll do 10 more minutes and then wrap it up?
Yeah.
Okay,
that sounds
great.
good to me.
It's the show.
A couple more. Here's a good question. This is a great one. If you could visit any dumb all access, which would you choose?
I know where I'd go.
Where, Rob?
Sedona, Arizona, secret mountain facility.
Okay, if you hit that one, I got the Dulce one. Gerb?
Okay.
I would want to visit the alleged Tahone radar cross-section facility out in Antelope Valley, California. The alleged facility. I would also be pretty interested in visiting the Dugway deep underground military base, which I'm extremely confident exists. One of the funny things we heard from Greer actually on the event is Greer postulated the Dugway Dome was 1,300 square miles. That's demonstrably false. 1,300 square miles is the size of Dugway Proving Ground. So he's conflating the size of Dugway with the actual dumb size. But as far as I do understand, that is a pretty dang large facility. But I would give anything to go to one of those two places. Also, some sites out in DC, possibly pretty deep under the Pentagon, would be rather interesting too.
And they likely connect to places like Raven Rock and other such deep underground military facilities that are known to the public as well.
Yeah, and of course, there's probably many such sites that have actually been constructed. I mean, back in the 1960s, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers did a ton of kind of research and reports on deep basing sites for possible dumb locations, and some literature from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, about possible underground sites reached as far as like nearly 10,000 feet underground. That is obscene. Jeez. And of course, the Corps of Engineers did numerous studies and analyses on kind of self-sustaining ecosystems of possibly like embedded nuclear reactors, food staff, so actual staff underground, and custodial staff and food staff. So, there might be some pretty interesting underground facilities we're not aware of.
Can I change my answer? I apologize.
Sure.
Huntsville. I'm reading the chat right now, and I should have said Huntsville, just because Huntsville to me is fascinating rocket program, but also like, as I understand it, there's a huge mountain like in Redstone Arsenal. It's like kind of why it's the Arsenal, but like during World War II, they found a lot of caves. So I think it'd be a really cool dumb to check out just because it has like natural features. Like it wouldn't be this like deep underground, concrete box. Like it'd probably look a little bit like more Batman-esque, got the Bat Cave, got the saucer there, the stalagmites coming down. I don't know. Could be pretty cool.
Like,
to those in the chat that are unaware, like Huntsville, Alabama is very far north in Alabama, just south of like Tennessee. And it is a very, very mountainous, rocky region. Much more so than you might expect.
Cave City.
Yeah, that reminds me. I think it's Inyo County out in California, on which China Lake sits, the naval facility. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers thought of a huge cavernous site below China Lake, which I do believe is a real facility. Ross, this is one for you from good friend Pavel. Shout out Pavel, because I don't know if this is for the panel. I think Rob, you might have insights on this over anyone. Is there a description of the really crazy alleged videos Ross tweeted on 1 March? Will they be released, and have you heard of them before? Could you describe them?
So I can't describe them verbatim. I know that one of them that was described by Ross, by some sources that reached out to him, and I've heard this as well from an individual who was on the UAP task force, was that there is at one point a video that was filmed a long time ago from a B-52 bomber in which a saucer type craft flies up alongside them. There is the ability to see through some form of viewport or window aperture on the craft, some sort of occupant, which is clearly visible on the video, and then it flies away. I know that's one of the videos that's been purported to exist. I'm not familiar with the others that Ross described off the top of my head. I know I saw his tweet earlier, but it's been a long day.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we'll get through, and shout out Pavel, of course. Go subscribe to Seco Activo.
Yeah,
Pavel's
that's
great.
our boy.
We'll get through
Good to
these
see you,
three.
Pavel.
We'll get through these 3 super chats and then start to wrap it up. Wagboss, thank you, sir. Hey, I'll be seeing you soon, man. This is for Kermit because this is Kermit's. He's spearheading this for the USS Eisenhower doc. Do you lean towards 1, they were fed BS, 2, that's passage material, or 3, some document that exists or other?
I'd say mix of 2 and 3. So yeah, it is possible that this is a bogus document. I think the evidence would suggest that this is probably a forgery, to DDJ's point. But I, and this might be because I don't really have a lot of military experience and I'm naive in that regard, but I hold open the possibility that this might be an actual activity that it used people that were outside of the normal reporting structure or chain of command. Specifically, the admiral becoming director of chief of staff in like July 1st of 1985, and this happening only a couple months prior. I talked about previously, like sometimes in corporate world, I mean, this isn't the military, that's not the military, but in the corporate world, sometimes you step up to the higher role and assume those positions without the actual assumption of those responsibilities or the title or the compensation. So maybe that's what's going on. And this is an off books activity that like wasn't reported and we're all learning about it for the first time. But then again, like the only people that are really learning about this document or really talking about it, I would say is largely relegated to the UFO community, just because a lot of the national discourse right now is just on the files. And the only ones that are, for lack of a better term, autistic enough to really reconcile all these documents is really the gang here assembled. So, but I think it would be important for us to talk about this more and, just be mindful of these things, especially with successive tranches. At least we're going through this exercise now. You know what I mean?
And yes, chat, he does love the word tranche.
And finally, Eric, when disclosure, and thank you so much. I think we're all on the same page that hopefully soon, my man. But thank you so much, Eric. Okay, fellas, do you guys have any closing statements before we wrap up? Plug your stuff, guys, so people know where to find you, and then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, for sure. So you can find me at KermDogENT. It's here kind of with the subline. I'm on X. That's really where I'm the most active if you want to reach me. Unfortunately, I did not have enough time to put together a PowerPoint presentation. Rob honestly beat me on all that. So great job. Also just fantastic work too. Shout out.
Mm-hmm.
I usually am the meme guy. I like memes and all that stuff, but I also think like right now we kind of need serious commentators, serious analyzers, and serious analysis being done. So I apologize that I'm not as like, off the cuff or riffy or funny as I typically am, or I was on the last live stream. But if you guys have anything you want to share with me, memes, but also specifically my swim lane is like understanding the financial implications and trying to follow the money literally with this program. So if you guys are interested in that type of research, or if you want to learn more, follow me on Twitter. I'll try to respond to DMs if I can. But yeah, that's where you'll find me. And also I will be posting my Substack as well on my X account once it goes live. And I will of course text Gerb and Rob as well. If they want to plug it, they can. No pressure, but that's what I got in the pipeline right now.
I feel pressured.
Hey man, look, kidding. It's okay. It's okay. I get it.
Man. Well, if you guys want to, follow me or support me, the 2 ways that you can do that is either through Twitter at Rob Jones Reports. I refuse to call it X. I'm just a boomer. But then also you can watch the show that I work for on NewsNation called Reality Check with Ross Coulthart, if you've ever heard of it.
So, maybe we'll spoil this, Rob, that, maybe in the future, pretty soon, I'll have an interesting collab with your boss, your direct boss,
I think almost certainly.
You work for. So that would be rather exciting.
Yeah, it's going to be very exciting.
But yes, as far as for me, guys, thank you everybody so much for being here. This whole stream, the chat was crazy active. We had like over 1,600 followers or 1,600 viewers the whole time. Shout out Scrum, shout out Mike, the mods in here. Shout out Mr. Justin as well. I see you there, my friend. I love you very much. And just thank you all so much for being here. From me, Ross Coulthart, the comment says, Rob here works directly under Mr. Ross Coulthart.
Yep.
But as far as what you got coming for me, you all know I've already said what I'm working on now. Part 2 of my secrecy apparatus project I'm almost more excited for it than part 1. It's going to be really interesting. I'm almost done with the script for it, so trying to get that out as soon as possible, and some exciting stuff to come, guys. But you know, we say this all the time, but now we have a real opportunity to do more live streams as these fellas are putting out great work. When Kerm has an article, Rob has something on the front page of NewsNation or a PowerPoint, hop on stream, talk about something. And thank you all so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having us, man. And honestly, man, thanks for being our friend. Rising tide raises all ships, and I think we're all going to do great things together. So,
yeah, just for everybody watching, we're also all in real life friends. We've spent plenty of time together. We were able to meet Rob's beautiful family over the weekend, so you know, just good stuff to come. Thanks, everybody. Rob and Kerm, will you stay for just 1 second while the stream uploads?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.